When my husband passed away, his wealthy boss called me and said, "I found something. Come to my office right now." Then he added, "And don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." When I got there and saw who was standing at the door, I froze. Christopher Barnes, David's corporate attorney for 15 years. The man who drafted our wills, handled every contract at Sentinel Technologies, even given a champagne toast at Marcus and Jessica's wedding 2 years ago. He was standing in the doorway of Richard Walsh's executive office like a sentry, his silver hair perfectly styled, his charcoal suit pressed with military precision. In his manicured hands was a leather portfolio, expensive, the kind lawyers carry when they're about to destroy someone's life. "Margaret." His voice was silk over steel. That same smooth tone he'd used at David's funeral 6 hours ago when he squeezed my shoulder and told me everything would be taken care of. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Richard asked me to meet you here. There are some urgent matters regarding David's estate. Everything about this was wrong." I'd buried my husband this morning. Watched them lower his casket into frozen ground while Marcus sobbed on one side of me and Jessica gripped my hand on the other, whispering, "We'll get through this together, Mom." The cemetery had been full, David's colleagues from Sentinel, neighbors, friends from our church. Richard Walsh had delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking when he called David the most honest man I've ever known. That was 8 hours ago. Now Richard's cryptic phone call echoed in my head. "You could be in danger." "Where's Richard?" I asked, not moving from the elevator lobby. Barnes smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Inside, waiting. There are documents that require your immediate attention." He gestured toward the office door with one hand, but his body remained firmly planted in the doorway. He wanted me to walk past him, turn my back to him. Every instinct I had screamed, "No. Step aside, Christopher." The command came from behind Barnes, sharp and cold. Richard Walsh appeared in the doorway, and I barely recognized him. This wasn't the composed CEO who'd eulogized my husband this morning. Richard's tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. His eyes were bloodshot, ringed with shadows like he hadn't slept in days. His silver hair, always immaculate, looked like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. But it was the expression on his face that made my chest tighten. Fury. Raw, barely controlled rage directed at the man blocking his doorway. "I didn't invite you to this meeting," Richard said, each word deliberate. Barnes's smile never wavered. "As David's attorney and the executor of his estate, I have every legal right to be present when matters concerning his widow are discussed." He paused, letting that word hang in the air. Widow. Like it was a brand, a weakness. Especially when those matters involve potential criminal liability. The floor tilted beneath my feet. "What?" My voice came out as a whisper. Barnes opened the portfolio with practiced precision. He pulled out a document, turned it so I could see it from 15 feet away. Even from this distance, I recognized the Sentinel Technologies letterhead, and at the bottom, a signature. My signature. Mrs. Torres Barnes's voice had shifted from silk to ice. "I'm afraid there are some very serious irregularities in Sentinel Technologies' financial records. Wire transfers totaling $8.3 million to unauthorized vendors over the past 14 months. And your signature appears on every single authorization form." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible. I've never signed anything for Sentinel. I don't even work there." Nevertheless, he pulled out another document, then another, fanning them like a poker player revealing a winning hand. "Your signature is here, on wire transfer authorizations, on vendor approval forms, on account opening documents for 3 offshore corporations." He stepped toward me, and I instinctively stepped back. "I've been conducting an internal audit at Richard's request. What I've found is deeply troubling." "Those aren't my signatures," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "Forensic analysis will determine that." Barnes tilted his head, studying me like I was a specimen under glass. "But these investigations can take years, Margaret. Years you'd likely spend fighting federal embezzlement charges, wire fraud, money laundering. The FBI takes financial crimes very seriously, especially when they involve defense contractors like Sentinel." He let that sink in. "You could be looking at 20 years in federal prison." The hallway started spinning. 20 years. I was 52 years old. I'd be 72 when I got out. If I got out. Unless. Barnes stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive, the same brand David used to wear. Unless you're willing to cooperate. To make this right before it escalates further. Get to the point, Barnes. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. He'd moved into the hallway now, positioning himself between Barnes and me. Protective. Tell her what you really want. Something flickered across Barnes's face. Annoyance. He didn't like Richard interfering with his script. Very well. Barnes pulled a different set of documents from the portfolio. These were stapled together, official-looking, with colored tabs marking signature lines. David owned 8% of Sentinel Technologies. Shares granted to him over 20 years as deferred compensation. Those shares are currently valued at $4.2 million. As his widow, those shares passed to you. My mind struggled to process. David's shares. He'd been so proud of them, called them our retirement security, our legacy for Marcus. However, Barnes continued, given these financial irregularities, and given your signature on fraudulent documents, the board has serious concerns about your fitness to hold those shares. Concerns about potential conflicts of interest, about your judgment. He held out the new documents. This is a transfer agreement. You sign over David's shares to a trust I've established. In exchange, I make the evidence of your involvement in the embezzlement disappear. The investigation stops. The FBI never gets called. You walk away, Margaret. Live quietly. Visit your son. No scandal, no prison. The words hit me like physical blows. He wanted David's shares. The shares David had earned through 2 decades of 70-hour weeks, missed birthdays, sacrificed weekends. The shares that represented everything David had built. You're trying to steal my husband's life's work, I said. I'm trying to keep you out of prison. Barnes's mask of sympathy finally cracked, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You have 24 hours to decide. Sign the transfer, or I file a criminal complaint with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Your choice. She's not signing anything. Richard's voice was granite. Get out of my building, now. Barnes looked between us, his jaw tight. Then his expression shifted, softened into something that might have looked like concern to someone who didn't know better. Margaret, I understand you're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. That's why I've already contacted Marcus. He's very worried about you, worried you might make irrational decisions in your current emotional state. My heart stopped. Marcus, I whispered. Your son is a good man. He wants to protect you. Barnes tucked the documents back into his portfolio with deliberate care. He's already filed preliminary paperwork for an emergency conservatorship. For your own protection, of course. He's concerned that in your grief, you might be vulnerable to manipulation, might make financial decisions you'll regret. A judge will review the petition in 72 hours. The world tilted again. Conservatorship. That meant Marcus would control everything. My money, my house, my ability to make my own decisions. I'd become a legal child, dependent on my son's permission for everything. Marcus. My baby. The boy I'd rocked through nightmares, driven to Little League practice, helped with homework at the kitchen table. The son I'd defended when David got frustrated with his poor grades, his dropped college classes, his string of failed jobs. Marcus was trying to take away my freedom. You're lying, I said. But the words came out hollow. Barnes smiled that terrible smile again. Am I? Call him. Ask him yourself. But I'd choose my words carefully, Margaret. If you seem unstable, erratic, angry without cause, well, that only strengthens his case for the conservatorship, doesn't it? He checked his watch. A Rolex. I'd never noticed before how expensive everything about Christopher Barnes was. His suits, his shoes, his briefcase. How did a corporate attorney afford all that? 24 hours, Mrs. Torres. After that, I file the complaint. And once the FBI gets involved, there's no taking it back. No deals, no second chances. He nodded to Richard, cold and formal. Walsh, I'll see myself out. Barnes walked past me to the elevator, pressed the button. As he waited, he turned back. Oh, and Margaret? Marcus mentioned you've seemed confused lately, forgetting things, getting dates mixed up. He's worried you might be showing early signs of dementia. He just wants to help. He's a good son." The elevator doors opened. Barnes stepped inside. "I really am sorry about David," he said as the doors began to close. "He was a good man. It's a shame he died so suddenly, so unexpectedly." The doors closed. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The hallway was spinning and I was falling and... "Margaret." Richard's hands gripped my shoulders, steadying me. "Look at me, look at me." I focused on his face, on the fury there, the barely controlled rage. "None of it is real," he said. "None of those signatures are yours. Do you understand me? This is a setup." "Marcus," I choked out. "Marcus is..." "Inside. Now." Richard guided me into his office, one hand on my elbow like he was afraid I'd collapse. Maybe I would, maybe I should. Maybe if I just fell apart, someone else could handle this nightmare. But David's voice echoed in my head. Something he'd said 2 weeks before he died, when I'd asked him why he looked so tired. "Some fights you can't walk away from, Maggie. Some things are worth standing up for, even when you're scared." Richard closed the office door, locked it. Then he moved to his desk and pressed a button. A screen descended from the ceiling, white and blank. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to a leather chair. "What I'm about to show you is going to be hard to watch, but you need to see it. You need to understand what's really happening here." I sank into the chair. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Richard's office was on the 40th floor, glass walls overlooking the city. Beyond the windows, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful. The kind of sunset David would have pointed out to me, pulling me close to watch it together. David was gone, and someone was trying to destroy everything we'd built. "Margaret." Richard sat on the edge of his desk directly in front of me. His face was serious, careful, like he was about to deliver terrible news to a terminal patient. 4 days before David died, he came to my house at midnight. He brought evidence, documents, USB drives. He told me everything. Everything? My voice sounded hollow. About the embezzlement, about the forged signatures, about who was really behind it. Richard paused, about why he was afraid he was going to die. The room went cold. "What are you saying?" Richard picked up a remote, pointed it at the screen. "I'm saying David didn't have a heart attack, Margaret. I'm saying your husband was murdered." The screen flickered to life. A document appeared. Official. Medical. I recognized the letterhead, San Francisco County Medical Examiner. "I ordered a private autopsy," Richard said quietly, "against the family's wishes, against the funeral home's recommendations. I did it because David asked me to. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd do it." My eyes couldn't focus on the words. Medical terminology I didn't understand. Lab values, toxicology screens. "Read this line," Richard said, pointing to a section highlighted in yellow. "Ethylene glycol detected in blood, liver, and kidney tissue. Concentration levels consistent with chronic exposure over approximately 4 to 6 months. Acute ingestion within 24 to 48 hours of death. Manner of death, homicide. Ethylene glycol," I whispered. "What is that?" "Antifreeze." Richard's voice was gentle. "Terrible. Someone was poisoning your husband, Margaret. Small doses over months, enough to cause organ damage that looked like stress-related illness. And then a final, massive dose that triggered the heart attack." The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white. "Who?" The word came out broken. "Who would—" "Keep watching," Richard said. He pressed another button. The screen changed to security footage, black and white. Timestamp in the corner, 11:47 p.m., 6 months ago. The hallway was empty, except for one person using a keycard to access a door marked David Torres, CFO. Even in grainy security footage, I recognized her immediately. Jessica. My daughter-in-law. The woman who called me Mom, who'd held my hand at David's funeral today, whispering that we'd get through this together. I watched as Jessica sat at David's computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She opened drawers, pulled out files, photographed documents with her phone. Then she found what she was looking for, a small USB drive in David's desk drawer. She held it up to the camera like a trophy, smiling. "There's more," Richard said softly. The timestamp jumped forward. 2:34 a.m. Jessica was back, returning the USB drive to the drawer. But she wasn't alone now. "Marcus. My son." They high-fived. Jessica jumped into his arms, wrapping her legs around his waist. They kissed, and then Marcus said something to the camera. I couldn't hear it, but I could read his lips. "We're going to be rich." The screen went black. I couldn't feel my body, couldn't feel anything except the howling emptiness where my heart used to be. "There's more footage," Richard said. Hours of it. Jessica accessing David's files over 14 months. Marcus approving fraudulent wire transfers using his junior analyst credentials, both of them creating the forged documents with your signature. He paused. "Margaret, they embezzled $8.3 million from Sentinel, and they were planning to frame you for all of it. Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why would Marcus—" David found journal entries on a laptop Jessica left in the office safe. She'd been manipulating Marcus for years, feeding his resentment, convincing him that David had stolen from him. That you both owed him the life he deserved. Richard's face was grim. "She has $340,000 in gambling debts. She needed money fast. And Marcus wanted revenge for every time David chose work over his Little League games. Every time David said no to something Marcus wanted. I thought about all the times I'd defended Marcus to David. All the times I'd said, he's just going through a phase. He'll grow up. He'll find his way. I'd been so wrong." "Christopher Barnes is their attorney," Richard continued. "He's been helping them from the beginning, setting up the shell companies, creating the forged documents, building the case against you, in exchange for David's shares and a percentage of the embezzled money." "And the conservatorship?" I asked, though I already knew. "If Marcus gets conservatorship, he controls your assets, including the shares. He signs them over to Barnes's trust, you're declared incompetent, and everything David built disappears." Richard leaned forward. "Margaret, they're going to take everything. Your freedom, your home, your money, David's legacy. And there's nothing you can do about it unless you're willing to fight." I looked at Richard Walsh, this man who'd been David's mentor for 20 years, who'd taught him everything about running a company, who'd delivered a beautiful eulogy this morning about integrity and friendship. "What do I do?" I whispered. Richard stood, walked to a large safe behind his desk. He entered a code, pulled open the heavy door, and removed a thick accordion folder. He placed it on the desk in front of me. David spent the last 3 weeks of his life documenting everything, every transaction, every forged signature, every lie. He recorded conversations. He gathered evidence. He built an airtight case. Richard's voice cracked. He knew he was running out of time. He knew Jessica had figured out that he'd discovered the truth. He knew they were going to kill him, I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a letter in David's handwriting. His familiar scrawl, slightly messy, that I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and love notes for 28 years. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I should have told you everything sooner. But I need you to be strong now. I need you to finish what I started. Our son has made his choice. I've tried to understand it, tried to forgive it, but some betrayals are unforgivable. Some crimes demand justice. Everything you need is in this folder. Richard will help you. Trust him. Trust yourself. And remember, justice isn't about revenge. It's about truth. It's about making sure no one else suffers what we've suffered. I love you. I've always loved you. Every single day of our 28 years. Finish this for me. Always yours, David." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. But underneath the grief, something else was building. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. "What's the plan?" I asked, looking up at Richard. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. "David left very specific instructions," Richard said. "We're going to give them exactly what they want. We're going to let them think they've won. And then we're going to destroy them so completely they'll wish they'd never been born." I thought about Marcus high-fiving Jessica on that security footage. about Barnes threatening me with prison, about my husband dying alone, poisoned by the people he'd loved most. "When do we start?" I asked. Richard checked his watch. "Christopher Barnes gave you 24 hours to sign over the shares. We have 23 hours and 42 minutes to file criminal charges against all three of them." He pulled out his phone. "I have a federal prosecutor on speed dial. She owes me a favor. A big one. They'll know it came from me," I said. "Good." Richard's smile widened. "Let them know. Let them understand that you're not the weak, grieving widow they thought you were. Let them realize they've made a terrible mistake." I stood up, David's letter still clutched in my hand. Through the window, the sun had fully set. The city was bathed in darkness, punctuated by thousands of lights. 24 hours ago, I'd had a husband, a son, a daughter-in-law, a family. Now I had a folder full of evidence and a promise to keep. "Make the call," I told Richard. He nodded, already dialing. As I watched him speak to the prosecutor, I made a promise to David, to myself, to every person who'd ever been betrayed by the people they loved most. They were going to pay for what they'd done. Every single one of them. I couldn't stop staring at the screen, at my son's face frozen in that moment of triumph, his lips forming those words. "We're going to be rich." "There's more," Richard said quietly. "Much more. But first, you need to understand the timeline." He clicked the remote again. A new document appeared, a detailed autopsy report with sections highlighted in different colors. The medical examiner who handled David's initial examination listed cause of death as acute myocardial infarction. Heart attack. Given David's age, his stress levels, the long hours he worked, it seemed reasonable. No one questioned it. Richard's voice was tight with controlled anger. "But David made me promise something 3 weeks before he died. He said, 'If anything happens to me, Richard, anything at all, don't let them just bury me and move on. Make them look closer.'" "He knew," I whispered. He suspected. He'd been sick for months. Nausea, fatigue, confusion. "You remember?" I did. God, I remembered. Taking him to 3 different doctors, each one saying it was stress, prescribing rest, suggesting he cut back on work. I'd made him herbal tea, bought vitamins, begged him to take a vacation, all while someone was systematically poisoning him. "The private autopsy found ethylene glycol in his system," Richard continued. "Antifreeze. In therapeutic doses over months it mimics other conditions. Kidney problems, heart issues, neurological symptoms. But in the final analysis they found something else." He zoomed in on a section of the report. In the 72 hours before David died, he ingested a massive dose, enough to trigger organ failure and cardiac arrest. The poisoning was slow, methodical, designed to look like natural decline, until someone decided they couldn't wait any longer. My hands were shaking. Who had access to... But I already knew. David drank coffee every morning, 1 cup, black, made in our kitchen. I usually made it for him before my morning walk. But in the last 6 months, Jessica had started coming over early, surprising us with breakfast, insisting on making David's coffee just the way he likes it. "She was in our home," I said, my voice breaking. "Every morning. She'd bring pastries from that bakery David loved. She'd hug me and tell me I was the best mother-in-law in the world while she was poisoning your husband." Richard's face was grim. "Yes." The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair, forcing myself to breathe. "Show me the rest," I said. Richard hesitated. "Margaret, show me everything." He nodded slowly, then pulled up a new file. More security footage, this time from inside David's office. The timestamp read, 1:17 a.m., 3 months ago. Jessica was back, but this time she was more confident. She wasn't just copying files, she was creating them. I watched as she pulled up templates, filled in information, and then my stomach turned. She pulled out a small scanner and a stack of old papers. "Those are from our house," I said, recognizing the documents. Birthday cards, permission slips from when Marcus was in school. "That's the card I signed for our anniversary dinner reservation 8 years ago." "She collected your signatures," Richard explained. "Real ones. then use software to replicate them on fraudulent documents. She was good at it, very good. The forgeries are nearly perfect. The footage continued. Jessica worked for over an hour creating document after document, wire transfer authorizations, vendor contracts, bank signature cards, each one bearing my forged signature. How many? I asked. 47 documents so far. All with your name, your forged signature, your fabricated authorization. Richard paused the video. If this goes to trial without our evidence, you'll be charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The prosecutors will have documentation spanning 14 months showing a systematic theft of $8.3 million. All pointing to you. But I didn't. I know. David knew. But proving forgery takes time, expensive forensic analysis, expert witnesses, and even then juries can be skeptical. Why would a daughter-in-law frame her husband's mother? What's the motive? He looked at me hard. Unless they convince the jury you're a bitter woman who resented your son, who wanted to punish David for working too much, who saw an opportunity to steal and blame it on your boss. That's insane. That's exactly what their defense will be. Richard pulled up another file. Marcus has been documenting your concerning behavior for months. Text to Jessica about how you seem confused and forgetful. Emails to David expressing worry about your mental state. He's been building a narrative, Margaret, one that makes you look unstable. He showed me the messages. I read them with growing horror. Marcus to Jessica, Mom forgot what day it was again. Asked me 3 times when Dad's birthday is. I'm really worried about her. Marcus to David, Dad, I think Mom needs to see a doctor. She left the stove on yesterday. Could have burned the house down. Jessica to Marcus, your poor mother. The stress is really getting to her. Maybe we should talk to her about getting some help? None of it was true. I'd never forgotten what day it was. Never left the stove on. But they'd created a paper trail of lies, building a foundation for the conservatorship claim. They've been planning this for over a year, I said numbly. Longer. Richard pulled up a new document, a printout from a private investigator's report, dated 2 years ago. David found this hidden in Jessica's laptop. She hired an investigator to research Sentinel technologies 6 months before she accidentally met Marcus at that bar in Newport Beach. I stared at the report. It detailed everything about Sentinel: revenue, executive compensation, ownership structure. There was a full page on David, including his role as CFO, his compensation package, and this line highlighted in yellow: David Torres owns 8% of company shares, currently valued at $3.8 million. Shares are transferable to spouse upon death, then to children. She targeted him, I whispered. She researched us like we were marks in a con. That's exactly what you were. Richard's voice was gentle but firm. Jessica Chen has done this before. Not murder, at least not that we can prove. But financial fraud. There's a sealed juvenile record in Nevada, a lawsuit in Arizona that was settled out of court. She's been running variations of this scam since she was 19. And Marcus? Richard's expression softened with something like pity. Marcus was her way in. Young, resentful, desperate to prove himself, easy to manipulate. She studied him, Margaret, found his weaknesses and exploited them. He pulled up more documents, printouts of Marcus's therapy records that Jessica had somehow obtained. His complaints about David always working, always choosing the job over family, his feelings of inadequacy, his belief that he'd never live up to his father's standards. She used everything, I said. Every insecurity, every grudge, every moment of teenage resentment. She weaponized it all. Yes. The screen changed again. This time it showed an audio file. The title made my breath catch: Jessica Confession Final.mp3. David wore a wire his last week, Richard explained. He knew time was running out. He could feel himself getting sicker. He needed proof, something, undeniable. He hovered his finger over the play button. Are you ready for this? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The audio crackled to life. David's voice, weak but clear. Jessica, we need to talk about the Meridian contracts. Jessica's response was bright, cheerful. Sure. What about them? I know they're fake. I know Meridian Strategic Partners doesn't exist. I know you and Marcus created the company to funnel money out of Sentinel. A pause. Then Jessica's voice, colder now. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I have the bank records, the wire transfers, the forged signatures. David's breathing was labored. I know about Margaret's signatures. I know you've been setting her up. Another pause. Longer this time. Does Margaret know you know?
Not yet.
Does Richard? Not yet. Jessica's laugh was sharp, almost amused. Then you're dumber than I thought, keeping this to yourself. I wanted to give Marcus a chance to come clean, to do the right thing. He's my son. He's not your son anymore, David. He's mine. And he wants what you've denied him his whole life. Respect, money, power, the life he deserves.
By stealing it?
By taking what should have been his from the beginning. Her voice turned venomous. You gave everything to that company, every weekend, every holiday, every birthday. You gave Richard Walsh your loyalty. You gave Sentinel your time. What did you give Marcus? Hand-me-down attention, leftover energy, the scraps of a father. So you kill me? You frame Margaret? You destroy everything we built?
No, David.
Her voice was calm, clinical. You destroy yourself. The stress, the long hours, the terrible diet. Everyone knows you were a heart attack waiting to happen, and when you're gone, Marcus gets what he's owed. Margaret gets to live out her days quietly. No scandal, no shame, just a widow mourning her husband. Unless I go to the police. A long, terrible silence. Then Jessica's voice, soft and deadly, you won't. Because if you do, Marcus goes to prison. Your son. The boy you claim to love despite never showing it. You'll send him to federal prison for 20 years. Could you do that, David? Could you really destroy your own son? Another pause. David's voice when he spoke was barely a whisper. You've thought of everything. I have. That's why you need to be smart about this. Keep quiet, let things play out. In a year, maybe 2, you can retire. Take Margaret on that trip to Italy she's always wanted. Leave Marcus alone to live his life. Everyone wins, except truth. Truth? Jessica laughed. Truth is whatever story people believe. And trust me, everyone will believe that Margaret embezzled that money. She's got means, motive, and opportunity. Her signature is on everything. The story writes itself. And if I don't stay quiet? Her voice dropped to something that made ice form in my chest. Then I'll make sure your death is very, very painful. And I'll make sure Margaret takes the fall for that too. The audio ended. I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face. David had known. He'd confronted her. He'd tried to protect me, protect Marcus, protect everyone, and she'd threatened to make his death painful. Had she kept that promise? Had his final hours been agony? There's one more thing, Richard said quietly. He pulled up a final document. A text message exchange between Jessica and Marcus, timestamped 2 days before David died. Jessica, he knows. He confronted me. Marcus, what do we do? Jessica, we accelerate the timeline. I'll triple the dose tomorrow. He'll be gone within 48 hours. Marcus, are you sure? Jessica, trust me. I've done the research. It'll look natural, and then everything we've worked for is ours. Marcus, what about Mom? Jessica, what about her? The paperwork is ready. Barnes files the complaint the day after the funeral. She signs over the shares or goes to prison. Either way, we win. Marcus, I love you. Jessica, I know. Now go delete these messages. But Marcus hadn't deleted them. David had cloned his son's phone a week earlier using spyware. Every text, every call, every email. David had captured it all. He documented everything, Richard said, every crime, every conversation, every piece of evidence needed to convict them. He built a case so airtight that no jury in America would acquit them. Then why didn't he go to the police? My voice cracked. Why didn't he just... Because he loved his son. Richard's eyes were wet. Even knowing what Marcus had become, David couldn't bring himself to destroy him. He kept hoping Marcus would back out, would choose right over wrong, would remember who he used to be. He paused. David was giving Marcus one last chance to be the man David had always believed he could be. And Marcus chose murder instead. Yes. I stood up, walked to the window. The city lights blurred through my tears. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Jessica were probably having dinner. Maybe celebrating. Maybe planning how to spend David's life insurance money. They had no idea I knew. They had no idea David had outsmarted them. They had no idea they were about to lose everything. "Richard," I said, turning back to him, "you said David left instructions. What were they?" Richard pulled a sealed envelope from the folder. My name was written on it in David's handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. "Maggie. By now you've seen the evidence. You know what Marcus and Jessica did. You know how Barnes helped them. And you're probably wondering what you should do. The answer is simple. Fight. Fight for the truth. Fight for justice. Fight for every person who's ever been betrayed by someone they loved. Don't let them win. Don't let them take everything we built and twist it into something ugly. I've given you every tool you need. Richard will help you. Trust him completely. He's been my brother in everything but blood. I'm sorry I won't be there to see you finish this. But I know you will. You're stronger than you've ever believed. Stronger than I ever told you. That's my failure, and I apologize for it. Show them what happens when they underestimate Margaret Torres. Show them that truth matters. Show them that some betrayals have consequences. I love you. I've loved you since the day we met in that community college library. I'll love you long after I'm gone. Finish this. Yours always, P.S. David. Check the lining of my favorite jacket. The brown leather one. There's something there you'll need. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it against my chest. What's in the jacket? Richard asked. I don't know. But I'm going to find out. I looked at him, and for the first time since David died, I felt something other than grief. I felt fury, cold, clear, absolute. Make that call to your prosecutor friend. File the charges, all of them. Margaret, once we do this, my son goes to prison. My daughter-in-law goes to prison. Christopher Barnes loses everything. I met his eyes, I know, and I don't care. They murdered my husband. They tried to frame me. They planned to steal everything David worked for. My voice hardened. They deserve everything that's coming to them. Richard smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd been waiting for permission to go to war. I'll make the call, he said, reaching for his phone. Wait. I held up a hand. How long do we have before Barnes expects my answer? 19 hours. Good. That gives us time. I grabbed my purse. I need to go home. I need to find what David left me. And then, I paused. Then I need to have dinner with my son. Richard's eyebrows rose. You're going to face them? I'm going to record them. Just like David did. I smiled, and it felt foreign on my face, like trying on armor for the first time. You said we need an airtight case. I'm going to give you one. I'm going to make them confess everything. That's dangerous. If they suspect, they won't. Because I'm going to be exactly what they expect, a grieving widow confused and overwhelmed, ready to sign whatever they put in front of me. I headed for the door. Call me in 2 hours. Tell me you've prepared the paperwork for transferring the shares. Tell me you think it's my best option. You want me to pretend I'm on their side? I want them to think they've won, right up until the moment we destroy them. Richard studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. David was right about you. You are stronger than anyone knew. I thought about David confronting Jessica, trying to save our son even while being poisoned. I thought about him documenting everything, building a case while his organs shut down. I thought about him writing me that letter in his final days, knowing he'd never see justice served. David was the strong one, I said quietly. I'm just finishing what he started. I left Richard's office and took the elevator down 40 floors. When I reached the parking garage, I sat in my car for 5 minutes, letting myself cry. For David, for the life we'd had, for the son I'd raised who'd become a murderer. Then I wiped my tears, started the engine, and drove home. David's brown leather jacket was hanging in our closet, right where it always hung. I took it down with shaking hands, felt along the lining until I found the small tear near the inside pocket. Inside was a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop. One file appeared, for Margaritis only. MP4. I clicked play. David's face filled the screen. He looked terrible, gaunt, exhausted, his skin gray. This had been recorded days before he died. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And you've already seen the evidence Richard has. But there's one more thing you need to know. One more piece I couldn't tell Richard because I'm ashamed." He paused, gathering strength. I knew what Marcus was becoming years ago. I saw the signs, the lying, the manipulation, the sense of entitlement, and I did nothing. I told myself he'd grow out of it, that he just needed time, that love would be enough to save him. Tears rolled down David's face. I was wrong, and my failure to act, my failure to hold him accountable, led to this. "No," I whispered to the screen. "Don't do this to yourself." "So I need you to do what I couldn't," David continued. "I need you to hold him accountable. Not just for my murder, for everything, for every lie, every manipulation, every crime. Marcus made his choices. Now he has to face the consequences." He leaned closer to the camera. "Don't let guilt stop you, Maggie. Don't let love blind you the way it blinded me. Marcus stopped being our son the day he chose Jessica over truth, the day he chose money over family, the day he chose murder over mercy." He wiped his eyes, took a breath. "There's $47 million in a Singapore account. Money I've been setting aside for years from legitimate investments and stock options. The account information is in the encrypted file on this drive. That money is yours. Use it to fight. Use it to rebuild. Use it to make sure they never hurt anyone else again." $47 million. David had been hiding money from me, from Marcus, from everyone. "I know you're angry that I kept secrets," David said, reading my mind. "But I had to. I suspected Marcus would go through our finances, would look for vulnerabilities. So I hid it where he'd never think to look. Offshore, in accounts under my mother's maiden name. It's clean money, Maggie. Every penny of it legal and documented. It's your war chest." The video ended. I sat in the dark, stunned. David hadn't just documented their crimes, he'd funded my revenge. My phone rang. "Richard." "I talked to the prosecutor," he said without preamble. "She's interested, but she needs more than surveillance footage and audio recordings. She needs testimony. She needs someone on the inside to flip." "Jessica?" I said. "We make Jessica flip on Marcus and Barnes." "How?" I smiled in the darkness. "By giving her exactly what she wants, a way out. Reduced sentence in exchange for testimony. Make her think she can save herself by throwing Marcus and Barnes under the bus." "She'll take it," Richard said. "Jessica's a survivor. She'll sacrifice anyone to save herself. Then let's give her the opportunity." I looked at David's face frozen on my laptop screen. "Set up a meeting. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Tell her you have a proposal that could keep her out of prison. And Marcus? Invite him to dinner tomorrow night. Tell him I want to discuss the conservatorship. Tell him I'm ready to sign whatever he needs." "You're playing a very dangerous game, Margaret." "I'm not playing," I said coldly. "And it's not a game, it's justice. David started it, I'm going to finish it." I hung up, then called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "Mom?" His voice was thick with fake concern. "Are you okay? I've been so worried." "I need to see you," I said, letting my voice quaver. "Tomorrow night. Please, Marcus. I can't do this alone." "Of course, Mom, of course. Jessica and I will come over. We'll bring dinner. You don't have to do anything," I whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "That's what family is for," Marcus said. "We take care of each other, always." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Then I set up the recording equipment Richard had given me, a small device that looked like a pen sitting in my shirt pocket. Tomorrow night, Marcus and Jessica would come to my house. They'd eat my food. They'd pretend and they'd confess to everything. Because that's what killers do when they think they've won. They gloat. I looked at David's picture on my nightstand, the photo from our wedding day, both of us young and broke and stupidly happy. "I've got this," I told him. "I promise." And for the first time since he died, I believed it. The next morning I woke at 5 a.m., David's side of the bed still cold and empty. For a moment, one blessed, ignorant moment, I forgot he was gone. Then reality crashed back and I remembered everything. My husband was dead. My son had killed him. And today, I was going to start destroying my own child. I made coffee in the kitchen where Jessica had poisoned David. Used the same pot, the same cup. Wondered how many times she'd stood in this exact spot, smiling at me while stirring antifreeze into my husband's morning routine. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed. Richard, Jessica meeting set for 9. She jumped at it, sounded nervous. Good. She should be nervous. I spent the next hour going through David's USB drive, the encrypted files he'd mentioned. The password was our wedding date. Of course it was. Inside were hundreds of documents, bank statements, corporate filings, investigative reports, and a folder labeled The Beginning. I opened it. The first document was a background check on Jessica Chen, dated 3 years ago, long before she'd met Marcus at that Newport Beach bar. David had been investigating her even then. Jessica Marie Chen. Born Jessica Marie Zhang, Las Vegas, Nevada. Father unknown. Mother died of drug overdose when subject was 14. Raised in foster care. Juvenile records sealed, obtained copy through private channels. See attached. I opened the attachment. My stomach turned. At 16, Jessica had been arrested for identity theft. She'd stolen her foster mother's credit cards, opened accounts in the woman's name, charged over $60,000 before getting caught. The foster mother had dropped the charges, calling it a misunderstanding. But the police report told a different story. Jessica had been systematic, calculating, showing no remorse when confronted. At 18, she'd been involved in another scheme, this time targeting an elderly man she'd befriended at a casino. She'd convinced him to add her to his bank accounts, then drained them. $127,000 gone in 3 weeks. The man's family had sued, but Jessica had declared bankruptcy. She'd walked away with the money hidden in offshore accounts, while her victim lost everything. At 21, she'd changed her name legally from Zhang to Chen, moved to California, reinvented herself as a marketing consultant with fabricated credentials and fake references. And at 23, she'd begun researching Sentinel Technologies. I found the private investigator's report David had commissioned. It detailed Jessica's methodology. She'd spent 6 months studying the company, identifying executives with access to funds. She'd narrowed her targets to 3 people, including David. But David was too careful, too watchful, so she'd shifted strategy. A highlighted section made my blood run cold. Subject has identified CFO's son, Marcus Torres, as potential access point. Marcus Torres, age 29, demonstrates financial instability, employment issues, and documented resentment toward father per social media analysis. Assessment: high vulnerability to manipulation. She'd profiled my son like a predator studying prey. The next document showed Marcus's social media history, posts David had archived before Marcus deleted them. Angry rants about David always working, never having time for family, bitter comments about rich people and corporate sellouts, complaints about how his father had everything while Marcus struggled to pay rent. Jessica had seen all of it. She'd studied Marcus's weaknesses, his insecurities, his resentments. And then she'd engineered their chance meeting. I found the bar's security footage David had obtained, dated 2 years and 3 months ago. I watched Jessica enter the Newport Beach bar alone, scan the room, spot Marcus drinking by himself. She'd hovered near him for 20 minutes observing. Then she'd accidentally bumped into him, spilling her drink on his shirt. Their entire love story was a lie from the first second. I clicked through more files. Text messages Jessica had sent herself, rehearsing what she'd say to Marcus. Character profiles she'd written about him, noting his triggers, his desires, his vulnerabilities. Marcus Torres, key insights: deeply resents father's success, feels overlooked and undervalued, craves recognition and respect. Financial insecurity creates urgency, poor impulse control. History of minor frauds, forged checks in college, credit card fraud, see attached reports. Mommy issues, identifies strongly with mother, views her as victim of father's workaholism. Exploitable resentments, father missing his childhood events. Father's criticism of his career failures, father's impossible standards. She'd known everything. David had somehow obtained Jessica's laptop, I didn't want to know how, and found her actual planning documents. She'd been treating my son's seduction like a military campaign. The timeline was methodical. Month 1 to 3, build attraction, mirror his interests, become his dream girl. Month 4 to 6, introduce financial complaints, plant seeds about fairness and what you deserve. Month 7 to 9, meet the family, win over the mother, establish trust, gather intelligence on father's work. Month 10 to 12, propose marriage, secure permanent access to family. Month 13 to 18, begin the embezzlement plan, manipulate Marcus into participating, frame the mother as backup patsy. Every phase had been executed perfectly. I'd been so happy when Marcus introduced us to Jessica. She'd been charming, attentive, seemingly devoted to my son. She'd called me every week just to chat, brought thoughtful gifts, remembered birthdays and anniversaries. And all of it, every smile, every hug, every "I love you, Mom," had been calculated manipulation. But here's what shattered me, the document showing when Marcus had fully committed to the plan. A text exchange from 18 months ago, after David had criticized Marcus's job performance at Sentinel. "Marcus, he'll never respect me. Nothing I do is ever good enough. Jessica, because he's a narcissist who needs you to fail so he can feel superior. Marcus, I'm so tired of being the disappointment. Jessica, you're not the disappointment. He is. He's the one who chose work over his son, who cares more about Richard Walsh than his own family. Marcus, sometimes
Jessica,
I wish..." "What? You can tell me." "Marcus, sometimes I wish he'd just die. Then I'd finally be free of his judgment." "Jessica, what if I told you there was a way to make that happen? And to make sure you got everything he's denied you your whole
Marcus,
life?" "I'm listening." That's when it started. Not when Jessica poisoned David's coffee, not when they forged documents or embezzled money. It started when my son said he wished his father was dead, and Jessica said she could make it happen. I read through the planning documents Jessica had created. She'd researched poisons for weeks, considered options: ricin too traceable, cyanide too obvious, arsenic too old-fashioned. She'd settled on ethylene glycol because it was common, easily obtained, and mimicked natural illness. She'd documented everything in chilling detail. Antifreeze poisoning protocol, initial phase months 1 to 4, small doses 10 to 15 ml in morning coffee. Symptoms will present as flu-like illness, fatigue. Subject will seek medical attention, but tests won't detect toxin unless specifically screening for it. Phase 2, months 5 to 6, increase dosage to 20 to 25 ml. Organ damage accelerates. Subject becomes noticeably ill, but still no definitive diagnosis. Final phase, massive dose 100 milliliters plus triggers acute kidney failure and cardiac arrest. Death appears natural given ongoing health problems. Timeline, subject deceased within 8 to 12 hours of final dose. She'd written it like a recipe, like she was planning a dinner party, not a murder. The medical records David had obtained showed his own declining health. Each doctor's visit, each test, each misdiagnosis. He'd been dying slowly, painfully, while doctors told him to reduce stress and get more sleep. And through it all, Jessica had been there, bringing him coffee, asking about his symptoms with fake concern, suggesting he needed rest, while steadily increasing the poison. I found David's personal journal entries from his final weeks, written in a password-protected file. Week 1. I know what they're doing now. Confirmed it today when I tested my morning coffee. Found ethylene glycol traces. Jessica has been poisoning me for months. I should be dead already. Maybe I am dying. I can feel my kidneys failing. But I need time. Time to document everything. Time to protect Margaret. Time to build an airtight case. Week 2. Confronted Jessica yesterday. Recorded the conversation. She admitted everything with such casualness, as if murder is just another business transaction. She's not human. What she's done to Marcus, the manipulation, it's worse than the poisoning. She's turned my son into a monster. Week 3, I'm running out of time. Can barely think straight anymore. The confusion, the pain, it's getting worse. But I have everything documented, every crime, every conversation. Every piece of evidence Margaret will need. Richard knows where to find it all. I just need to hold on a few more days. Final entry. Jessica knows I'm preparing evidence. I can see it in her eyes. She's going to accelerate the timeline. I probably have 48 hours, maybe less. If you're reading this, Margaret, I'm sorry. Sorry for not protecting you better. Sorry for not stopping this sooner. Sorry for leaving you with this burden. But I know you'll finish it. You're stronger than you've ever believed. Show them. Show them all what happens when they underestimate Margaret Torres. I love you. Always. The timestamp on that final entry was 48 hours before David died. I sat at our kitchen table, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. David had known he was dying, had felt himself failing, and instead of going to the hospital, instead of trying to save himself, he'd spent his final days building evidence to protect me. My phone rang. "Richard, Jessica's here," he said quietly. "Are you ready for this?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." "Put me on speaker." I heard rustling, then Jessica's voice. "Margaret? Are you okay?" The concern in her voice was perfect. Academy Award worthy. If I didn't know she was a murderer, I would have believed she genuinely cared. "Jessica," I said, letting my voice crack. "I'm so scared. Christopher Barnes came to me yesterday with these papers, these accusations." "I know, Mom. Marcus told me. It's insane. Those documents are obviously fake. But my signature can be forged. Anyone with basic software can do it." Her voice was smooth, reassuring. "Richard and I have been talking. We think Barnes is trying to take advantage of you in your grief." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. She'd probably rehearsed it. "There's something else," Richard said, his voice carefully neutral. "Margaret, I hate to bring this up now, but the life insurance," I asked. David had a $2.1 million policy through Sentinel. Given these allegations of fraud, the insurance company might delay payment or contest it entirely. But if you were to sign over David's shares to a trust, say one managed by Marcus as your conservator, the company might be more willing to release the funds. Silence. I could almost hear Jessica's mind calculating. "That's actually smart," she said slowly. "Mom, I know it feels scary to give up control, but Marcus is your son. He only wants to protect you, and if signing over the shares means you get David's life insurance, money you'll need to live on, maybe it's worth considering." "I don't know," I said, making my voice small and uncertain. "It's all so overwhelming." "Of course it is," Jessica cooed. "Why don't Marcus and I come over tonight? We'll bring dinner. We'll go through everything together, as a family. Would that help?" "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, please." "I don't want to be alone." "You're not alone, Mom. You'll never be alone. We're here for you. Always." I hung up before I vomited. "She's good," Richard said grimly. Even knowing what she is, part of me wanted to believe her concern was real. "That's what makes her dangerous," I said. "She doesn't just lie. She becomes the lie. She actually believes it while she's saying it." "You sure you want to go through with tonight? Having them in your home?" "I'm sure." "Did you set up the recording
I'll have it
equipment?"
delivered
this afternoon. State of the art, video and audio. Everything they say will be documented." He paused. "Margaret, if at any point you want to stop..." "I won't stop. Not until they're in prison. Not until every single person who helped them is destroyed." My voice hardened. David spent his last days building this case. I'm not going to waste his sacrifice by backing down now. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the day going through more of David's files. I found the shell companies Marcus had created. Apex Consulting Solutions, registered in Delaware, Marcus listed as CEO. Fake website, fake services. Real bank account where $2.8 million was deposited. Meridian Strategic Partners, registered in Nevada, Jessica listed as president. Another fake company. Another $3.1 million stolen. Summit Advisory Group, registered in Wyoming, Christopher Barnes listed as managing partner. The biggest theft, $2.4 million. David had traced every wire transfer, every forged authorization, every fraudulent invoice. He'd documented how they'd created fake deliverables to justify the payments, how they'd used my forged signature to approve everything, how they'd planned to blame me when the fraud was eventually discovered. But there was more, much more. I found evidence that this wasn't Jessica's first murder attempt. There was a file on an elderly woman in Arizona who died suddenly 3 years ago, right after adding Jessica to her will. Suspicious, but never investigated. Jessica had inherited $200,000, then disappeared. And a file on a man in Nevada who died of accidental carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage, 2 weeks after loaning Jessica $50,000 for a business opportunity. The police had ruled it suicide. Jessica had kept the money. David had connected the dots. Jessica Chen wasn't just a con artist. She was a serial killer who used financial manipulation as her weapon. How many people had she killed? How many families had she destroyed? My phone buzzed. "Marcus, see you at 7, Mom. Jessica's making your favorite, lasagna. We love you." I stared at those words. We love you. Did Marcus even understand what love meant anymore? Or had Jessica twisted that too, turned it into just another tool for manipulation? I thought about the little boy who'd climbed into my lap after nightmares, who'd made me construction paper cards for Mother's Day, who'd cried when his goldfish died. That boy was still somewhere in Marcus, wasn't he? But then I remembered his text to Jessica. "I wish he'd just die," and I knew the truth. That little boy was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for years. Maybe I'd just been too blind to see it. At 6 p.m., Richard's courier arrived with the recording equipment, a tiny camera disguised as a smoke detector, microphones hidden in picture frames, everything wireless, everything encrypted, everything admissible in court. I set it all up carefully, then dressed for dinner. Black dress, simple, appropriate for a grieving widow. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I'd lost weight in the days since David died. My eyes were hollow, ringed with shadows. I looked exactly like what Barnes wanted me to be. Weak, vulnerable, easily manipulated. Perfect. At 6:55, headlights swept across the living room. Marcus's car in the driveway. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and went to answer the door. Marcus stood on the porch holding a casserole dish, Jessica beside him with a bottle of wine. They looked like a magazine photo, young, attractive, successful. The perfect couple. "Mom," Marcus said, and pulled me into a hug. For just a moment, I let myself remember when his hugs meant safety, comfort, love. Then I remembered what he'd done. "Come in," and I pulled away. "I'm so glad you're here." Jessica kissed my cheek. "We're here for whatever you need, Mom." As they walked into my house, into the home where they'd murdered my husband, I thought about David's final journal entry. "Show them what happens when they underestimate Margaret Torres." "Let's eat," I said, smiling. "We have so much to discuss." And I led my son and his wife to dinner, not mentioning the recording equipment capturing their every word. The real revenge was about to begin. Jessica's lasagna sat congealing on my plate, untouched. I couldn't eat food prepared by the woman who'd poisoned my husband. But I held my wine glass, their wine, and pretended to sip while watching them across my kitchen table. Marcus ate with enthusiasm, complimenting Jessica's cooking, playing the devoted husband. He'd always been good at playing roles. Good son, loving husband, grieving child at his father's funeral this morning. Which version was real? Or were they all masks? "Mom, you're not eating," Marcus said, his voice full of fake concern. "You need to keep your strength up." "I'm not very hungry," I said, letting my voice waver. "Everything feels wrong. This house, this table. David should be sitting right there." I gestured to his empty chair. Jessica reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Her skin was warm, soft. "Murderous hands shouldn't feel so normal," she said gently. "Loss is devastating. But you're not alone. Marcus and we're your family. We'll get through this together." "Will we?" I looked at Marcus. "Richard told me about the conservatorship petition. You want to take control of my finances, my decisions?" Marcus's expression shifted. Surprise, then carefully crafted regret. Mom, it's not like that. It's just, you've been through so much. The stress, the grief. We're worried you might be vulnerable to people trying to take advantage. People like Christopher Barnes? Silence. Marcus and Jessica exchanged a glance. Quick, meaningful. Barnes is trying to help, Marcus said carefully. He's Dad's attorney. He wants to make sure everything is handled properly. By having me sign over your father's shares within 24 hours. Another glance between them. Jessica's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Is that what he told you? Jessica asked. That seems rushed. We should talk to him, Marcus. Make sure he's not pressuring Mom. The performance was flawless. Concerned children protecting their vulnerable mother. If I didn't know better, I'd believe them. He said there are irregularities in Sentinel's finances, I continued, watching their faces. Wire transfers, forged signatures. He said my signature appears on fraudulent documents. Marcus set down his fork. That's insane. You don't even work at Sentinel. How would your signature... Someone forged it. I looked directly at Jessica. Someone collected my real signatures from old cards and documents, used software to replicate them on fake authorizations. Jessica's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation. She was deciding how to play this. Then we'll prove the signatures are forged, she said smoothly. Handwriting analysis. Forensic testing. We'll clear your name completely. That takes time, I said. Barnes said I have until tomorrow morning to decide. Sign over the shares, or he files criminal charges. FBI. Federal prison. He's bluffing, Marcus said, but his voice was too quick, too defensive. He can't just... He showed me the documents. Dozens of them. All with my signature. Wire transfers totaling $8.3 million to companies I've never heard of. The number hung in the air between us. $8.3 million. Exactly the amount David had documented. What companies? Jessica asked, her voice still calm. Apex Consulting Solutions. Meridian Strategic Partners. Summit Advisory Group. I watched them carefully. Do those names mean anything to you? Marcus's face was a mask, but his hands clenched under the table. I saw it. The recording equipment saw it. No, he said. Should they? I don't know. Barnes seemed to think I should recognize them. He said they're shell corporations created to embezzle money from Sentinel. He said whoever created them did it very carefully, very professionally. Then we find who created them, Jessica said. We expose them. We prove you had nothing to do with it, making them both jump. I need some air. This is all too much. I walked to the living room window, away from the table, away from the camera angle, making them think I wasn't watching. But I could see their reflection in the glass, Marcus leaning close to Jessica, whispering urgently. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Jessica's response, a sharp shake of her head, a warning gesture. Then she stood, Mom, following me to the window. She said softly, putting her hand on my shoulder. I know you're scared, but we're going to fix this, whatever it takes. How? I turned to face her. How do we fix federal embezzlement charges? How do we fix forged signatures and $8 million stolen from David's company? We get ahead of it. We cooperate with authorities. We prove someone else did this. Her eyes were earnest, believable, and in the meantime, we protect your assets. That's why the conservatorship makes sense, Mom. If the FBI freezes your accounts, if they seize property, you'll have nothing. But if Marcus is your legal conservator, he can manage things, keep you secure. And David's shares? Transfer them to a trust, something Barnes can't touch, something that protects both you and Marcus's inheritance. There it was, the real play. Transfer the shares before the FBI could freeze them. Give Marcus control, make everything disappear, into legal structures designed to shield assets from investigation. Barnes suggested the same thing, I said slowly. Transfer the shares to a trust he'd manage. Darkened. Absolutely not. Barnes can't be trusted. We don't know his agenda. The trust should be managed by family, by Marcus. Is that what you think, Marcus? I called to my son. He came to stand beside Jessica. United front, predator and prey becoming one organism. I think we need to protect you, Mom. From Barnes. From whoever's trying to frame you. From people who might take advantage of your grief. He took my hands. Let me help. Let me handle the legal stuff, the financial stuff. You just focus on healing, on grieving, on taking care of yourself. His hands were warm. The same hands that had held mine when he learned to ride a bike. That I'd bandaged when he fell. That I'd clutched through scary movies and thunderstorms. The same hands that had typed texts ordering his father's murder. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I trust you. The relief on their faces was palpable. Jessica actually smiled, a real smile, not the performance version. You're making the right choice, Marcus said. We'll get the paperwork started tomorrow. Transfer everything to the trust and the FBI. Make sure you're protected. If they come, we'll deal with it. We'll prove you're innocent. We have resources, connections. He squeezed my hands. You're going to be fine, Mom, I promise. Promises from a murderer. How much were those worth? There's something else, I said, pulling away slightly. Richard mentioned David's life insurance. $2.1 million. But if there are fraud allegations, the insurance company might withhold payment, Jessica finished. Standard procedure during investigations. But once we clear your name, they'll release it. And if they don't? If this drags on for months or years? How do I live? The house payment, the bills. You move in with us, Marcus said immediately. We have plenty of room. You shouldn't be here alone anyway. Too many memories. Move in with them. Be completely under their control, dependent, vulnerable. I don't know. Just temporarily, Jessica added. Until everything settles. Until we know you're safe and the finances are sorted. It would actually help us too, Mom. We could keep an eye on you. Make sure you're eating, sleeping, grieving healthily. As if there was a right way to mourn your murdered husband. Can I think about it? I asked. This is all so fast. Of course, Marcus said. Take tonight. But Mom, we really do need to move quickly on the share transfer, before Barnes files those charges. Can you come to his office tomorrow morning? Sign the papers? This was it. The moment they thought they'd won. The moment they'd push me to commit. I let tears fill my eyes. Let my voice break. I'm so scared, Marcus. What if I'm making a mistake? What if... You're not, he said firmly. Mom, I'm your son. I love you. I would never let anything bad happen to you. Trust me. Trust me. The words David had wanted to hear. The words Marcus had never given him. Now he offered them to me, wrapped in lies. Okay, I said. Tomorrow morning. Perfect. 9 I'll call Barnes's office, set it up. Marcus pulled me into a hug. Everything's going to be okay. You'll see. Over his shoulder I saw Jessica. She was smiling. Not the performance smile, the real one. The smile of a predator that just landed a kill. They stayed another hour, talking about funeral arrangements and estate details and all the mundane things that follow death. I played my role perfectly, confused widow, grateful for their help, dependent on their guidance. When they finally left at 9 p.m., Jessica kissed my cheek. Get some rest, Mom. Tomorrow we start fixing everything. I watched their taillights disappear down the street. Then I locked the door, checked that all the recording equipment was still running. Did you get it? And called Richard. I asked without preamble. Every word, every glance, every incriminating moment. His voice was tight, with controlled fury. They just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and planning to steal David's shares. On camera, with audio. Is it enough? Combined with everything else? It's more than enough. But Margaret, they're expecting you at Barnes's office tomorrow morning. If you don't show, I'll show, I said. But not alone. And not to sign anything. What are you planning? I thought about David's final journal entry, about Jessica's planning documents, about Marcus's text, I wish he'd just die. I'm planning to end this, I said. Tomorrow morning at Barnes's office, we bring everything, the evidence, the prosecutor, federal agents if possible. We walk in and we burn their entire world down. That's risky. If Barnes is there, he won't be. He's warned them. Because you're going to call him tonight. Tell him I've agreed to sign everything. Tell him to prepare the final paperwork. Make him think he's won. I paused. Then tomorrow morning, when Marcus and Jessica and Barnes are all in that office congratulating themselves, we show them exactly what David uncovered." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "You're sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back. Marcus will know you've been working against him, playing a role." "Good," I said coldly. "Let him know. Let him understand that he's not the only one who can lie, who can manipulate, who can plan someone's destruction." "David would be proud of you," Richard said softly. "David's dead, murdered by our son, and the woman we welcomed into our family. Proud doesn't bring him back. Justice does." I hung up and stood in the kitchen where Jessica had served me dinner, where she'd served David poisoned coffee for 6 months, where Marcus had sat across from his father, plotting his death. Tomorrow they'd learn what happened when they underestimated Margaret Torres. Tomorrow they'd discover that grief wasn't weakness. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus as a little boy, bringing me dandelions from the yard. Then I'd see him on that security footage high-fiving Jessica after accessing David's computer, celebrating, planning, murdering. At 3 a.m., I gave up pretending and went to David's study. Our study, technically, though I'd rarely used it. This had been his space, his desk, his files, his leather chair that still smelled like him. I sat in that chair and Richard had given me access to everything David had compiled. Not just the evidence against Marcus and Jessica, everything. Financial records going back years, corporate documents, private investigator reports, and buried in a folder marked insurance, because of course David would hide crucial evidence in the most boring-sounding place. I found what Richard had mentioned yesterday. Christopher Barnes's real operation. The documents detailed a scheme that made Marcus and Jessica's embezzlement look like amateur hour. For 12 years, Barnes had been systematically stealing from Sentinel Technologies and at least 6 other corporate clients. He'd created an entire network of shell companies, fraudulent billing structures, and fake vendor relationships. The total theft? $47 million. David had discovered it accidentally while investigating Marcus's embezzlement. He'd been tracing the shell companies when he noticed patterns, similar corporate structures, identical registration methods, the same Delaware attorney filing all the paperwork. Barnes's attorney. David had dug deeper and found the connections. Barnes wasn't just Marcus and Jessica's co-conspirator. He'd been running this scheme for over a decade. Marcus and Jessica were just his latest recruits, useful idiots who'd taken the fall if anything went wrong. But David had figured it out. And that's why he had to die. I found the document that proved it, an email David had sent to Barnes 4 days before his death. "Christopher, we need to discuss some irregularities I've discovered in our vendor relationships. Several companies show payment patterns that concern me. I'd like to meet Monday to review. Please don't mention this to anyone else yet. I want to give you the opportunity to explain before I take it to Richard or the board. Professional courtesy. Call me this weekend to schedule. David." Professional courtesy. David's fatal mistake. He'd given Barnes a heads up, thinking he was being fair, giving his friend a chance to explain. Instead, Barnes had called Jessica, told her David was getting too close, told her to accelerate the timeline. And 36 hours later, I found Jessica's response in the files David had recovered from her laptop. Barnes called. "Says your dad is onto the bigger scheme. We need to move now. Can you get me into the house this weekend? I need to give him the final dose. Make it look natural. Barnes will handle the rest, create the evidence trail pointing to your mom, file the charges, force her to sign over the shares. We stick to the plan. Stay calm. This time next month we'll have everything." Marcus's reply, Saturday morning. "Mom has her walking group at 7 a.m. Dad will be alone. I'll make sure she stays out long enough." That Saturday, 3 days before David died, I'd gone to my walking group like usual. When I'd come home 2 hours later, Marcus had been there. He'd said he wanted to surprise us with breakfast. David had been sitting at the kitchen table looking gray and exhausted while Marcus and Jessica cooked. While Jessica poisoned his coffee one final time. I'd thanked them, hugged them, told Jessica what a thoughtful daughter-in-law she was. And David had looked at me with such sadness, such terrible, knowing sadness. Because he'd understood. He'd known what they'd done, and he'd known I was about to watch him die without understanding why. My phone buzzed. "Richard," Barnes called back. "Meeting set for 9 a.m. He sounds eager, thinks he's about to close the biggest score of his career. I almost feel bad for him, almost." "Is the prosecutor ready?" "Richard, Nina Reeves, Assistant U.S. Attorney. She's reviewed everything. Said it's the most comprehensive evidence package she's seen in 20 years. She's bringing 2 FBI agents specializing in financial crimes. They'll be waiting outside Barnes's office. Me, and if Marcus or Jessica tries to leave before..." "Richard, there will be agents in the lobby, the parking garage, every exit. No one leaves that building without being intercepted. It's over, Margaret. We're just letting them have one last moment of thinking they've won." I looked at the clock. 5 hours until the meeting. 5 hours until I faced my son and destroyed him. No, not destroyed him. He'd destroyed himself the moment he chose murder over mercy. I was just delivering the consequences. At 6 a.m., I showered and dressed. Black suit. Professional, strong. I put on the pearl necklace David had given me for our 25th anniversary. Armor disguised as jewelry. At 7 a.m., Richard called again, he asked. "None. You." "About 1,000. But David's evidence doesn't lie. Neither does their own confession from last night." He paused. "The recording was crystal clear, Margaret. Marcus explicitly discussed transferring the shares before charges could be filed. Jessica talked about protecting assets from federal seizure. They incriminated themselves completely because they thought I was weak, stupid, easy to manipulate. They thought grief made you vulnerable. They were wrong." At 7:30, my doorbell rang. I froze. Through the window, I saw Marcus's car. He wasn't supposed to be here. I opened the door. The meeting wasn't until 9. Marcus stood there holding 2 coffee cups, Jessica beside him with a box of pastries. "Morning, Mom," Marcus said cheerfully. "We thought we'd pick you up, drive you to Barnes's office. Moral support." This wasn't the plan. They weren't supposed to be here. If they drove me, I'd be trapped in their car, away from Richard, away from the FBI agents waiting at Barnes's office. Mind racing. "But I need to finish getting ready. Why don't you come in? I'll just be a few minutes." They exchanged a glance, quick, uncertain, then followed me inside. "We brought your favorite," Jessica said, handing me a coffee. "Caramel macchiato. Thought you could use something comforting before the meeting." Felt its warmth. Saw the lid sealed, unopened. Had she poisoned it? "Thank you," I said, setting it on the counter. "I'll drink it in the car. Let me just grab my purse." I went to the bedroom, pulled out my phone, texted Richard. They showed up early, bringing me themselves. Proceed as planned. "If I don't arrive by 8:50, come to my house. Richard, do not drink anything they give you." Too late to tell me that. I grabbed my purse, checked that the small recording device Richard had given me was still in the inner pocket, active, recording. Then I did something reckless. I walked to the bathroom, poured the coffee down the sink, rinsed the cup, and refilled it with water. Put the lid back on. If Jessica asked why I wasn't drinking when I returned to the kitchen, they were standing close together, whispering. They jumped apart when they saw me. "Ready?" "Ready," Marcus asked too brightly. The drive to Barnes's office took 25 minutes in morning traffic. Marcus drove while Jessica sat in back with me, holding my hand, playing the supportive daughter-in-law right until the end. "Mom, I want you to know something," Marcus said, watching me in the rearview mirror. "No matter what happens today, no matter what Barnes or anyone else says, I'm proud to be your son. Dad would be proud of how strong you're being." The lie was so smooth it almost sounded true. "Your father," my voice caught. Not an act this time. "Your father was the strongest person I knew." "I'm just trying to honor his memory." Jessica squeezed my hand. "You really are. And after today, after we've secured the shares and protected your assets, we can all take a breath, grieve properly, heal as a family." Family. The word tasted like poison. We pulled into the parking garage at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. As we walked to the elevator, I saw them. Federal agents in dark suits, trying to look casual while clearly watching us. Marcus and Jessica didn't notice. They were too focused on their victory. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt eternal. Jessica kept up a stream of reassuring chatter. Marcus checked his phone nervously. And I stood between them, thinking about David making this same journey countless times, working late, sacrificing time with family for a company. The elevator doors opened. Christopher Barnes's office was at the end of the hall. Through the glass walls, I could see him at his desk, preparing documents. He looked up, saw us, smiled. That predatory smile I'd seen 2 days ago. The smile of a man who thought he'd won. "Margaret," he said warmly as we entered. "And Marcus, Jessica, good morning. Please, sit." We settled into the chairs facing his desk. Barnes spread documents in front of us. Share transfer agreements, trust paperwork, power of attorney forms. Everything needed to steal David's legacy, Barnes said. "Margaret, if you'll just sign here and initial here, this will all be over. Your assets protected. The FBI investigation forestalled. Everything neat and clean." I picked up the pen. Marcus and Jessica leaned forward eagerly. Barnes's smile widened. And that's when Richard Walsh walked through the door, followed by a woman in a dark suit and 2 men with FBI badges clipped to their belts. Richard said coldly, "Nothing about this is neat or clean." Barnes's face went white. Marcus shot to his feet. "What the hell?" "Sit down, Marcus," the woman said. She had short dark hair and eyes like flint. "I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Nina Reeves, and the 3 of you are under arrest." Time seemed to stop. Jessica's hand found mine, squeezing, reflexive, desperate, looking for the protection she pretended to offer me. "Mom?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Mom, what's happening?" I stood slowly, facing my son. This boy I'd raised. This man I no longer recognized. "What's happening," I said quietly, "is that you're learning that grief doesn't equal weakness, that love doesn't equal blindness, and that your father was smarter than all 3 of you combined." Marcus's face crumpled with understanding. "You knew. This whole time, you knew." "David knew," I corrected. "He documented everything. Every crime, every conversation, every murder you planned." I pulled the USB drive from my purse, the one David had hidden in his jacket lining. "He left me instructions, evidence, proof of everything you've done." "No." Jessica's voice was sharp. "No, that's not. We were careful." "You were sloppy," Nina Reeves said. She nodded to the FBI agents. "Christopher Barnes, Marcus Torres, Jessica Torres, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." "Mom, please!" Marcus lunged toward me. An agent caught him, forced him back. "Mom, you don't understand. She made me. Jessica manipulated me. You texted her." "I didn't want to hurt Dad, I swear." Like ice. "I wish she'd just die." "That was you, Marcus. Your words, your choice." "I didn't mean it. I was angry. I was drunk. He was crying now, actual tears. "Please, Mom, please don't do this. I'm your son." "My son died the day he chose murder," I said. "The day he let that woman poison his father. The day he forged my signature and tried to frame me for his crimes." I stepped closer, close enough to see the panic in his eyes. "You're not my son anymore. You're just a criminal who happens to share my DNA." "You bitch!" Jessica's voice was pure venom now, the mask finally gone. "You sanctimonious bitch. You think you're better than us? You think David was some saint? He ignored his family for decades. He deserved what—" The agent cut her off, cuffing her hands behind her back. She fought, screaming obscenities, threats, accusations. Barnes just sat in his chair, looking gray, defeated. "I have statements to make," he said quietly. "Immunity deals to discuss. I can give you others, senators, judges, people you'll want more than me." Nina Reeves smiled. "It wasn't kind. We'll discuss what you have to offer. But Christopher, you're not walking away from this. None of you are." They led them out one by one. Jessica still screaming, Marcus still crying. Barnes silent and broken. I watched them go, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow satisfaction. Richard put his hand on my shoulder. "It's done. David's murder will have justice." "It's not done," I said. "This is just the beginning. The trial, the investigation, the discovery of how deep Barnes's corruption goes." I looked at him. "Are you ready for that? For Sentinel's name to be dragged through this?" "David's name will be vindicated," Richard said firmly. "The man who discovered the corruption, who documented everything, who gave his life to expose it. That's the story we'll tell." Nina Reeves approached us. "Mrs. Torres, I need you to come to the field office. We have hours of statements to take, evidence to process." "I have time. This is going to be a long day. I have nothing but time now." Cold, hollow satisfaction. Richard put his hand on my shoulder. "It's done. David's murder will have justice." "It's not done," I said. "This is just the beginning. The trial, the investigation, the discovery of how deep Barnes's corruption goes." I looked at him. "Are you ready for that? For Sentinel's name to be dragged through this?" "David's name will be vindicated," Richard said firmly. "The man who discovered the corruption, who documented everything, who gave his life to expose it. That's the story we'll tell." Nina Reeves approached us. "Mrs. Torres, I need you to come to the field office. We have hours of statements to take, evidence to process." "I have time. This is going to be a long day. I have nothing but time now." As we walked out of Barnes's office, past the agents securing the scene, past the curious onlookers in the hallway, I thought about David's final letter. "Finish this." "It's not finished yet," I whispered. "But I'm getting there, I promise." The FBI field office was everything you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, burnt coffee in styrofoam cups. I spent 6 hours in an interview room, walking Nina Reeves and her team through every piece of evidence David had gathered. Asked the same questions 3 different ways to verify my answers remained consistent. "Your husband was methodical," Nina said during a brief break. "In 20 years, I've never seen a civilian compile evidence this thoroughly. He built our case for us." "David was always thorough," I said. "It's why he was good at his job, why Richard trusted him completely. It's also why he's dead." Nina's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Torres. If he'd come to us sooner—" "He wanted to protect Marcus. Give him one last chance to do the right thing." I stared at my cold coffee. That chance cost him his life. "We'll make sure the jury understands that. David Torres was a victim of a calculated murder by his own son. That's the story we'll tell." "What happens now?" "Arraignment tomorrow. They'll all plead not guilty. We'll request they be held without bail. Flight risk, danger to witnesses, severity of charges. The judge will likely agree." She paused. "Then discovery begins. Their attorneys will get access to all our evidence. They'll mount a defense." "How long?" "We'll build our case for trial. 6 months to a year. Maybe longer if Barnes's corruption is as deep as we suspect. We're already finding connections to other cases, other victims. This could take years to fully unravel. Years. Years of trials and appeals and testimony. Years of facing Marcus in court. Years of Jessica's attorney painting me as the villain who destroyed her own son. But what choice did I have? Let them walk free? Let David's murder go unavenged? "I'll do whatever it takes," I said. When I finally left the FBI office at 7 p.m., Richard was waiting in the lobby. "I thought you might need a ride," he said. "The Bureau wanted to keep your car for processing, checking for tampering, evidence, that sort of thing. They think Jessica might have planted something in it. They think Jessica is capable of anything. And they're right." He held the door open. "Come on, I'll take you home." The drive was silent for the first 10 minutes. Then Richard said quietly, "Marcus's attorney already called. Wants to negotiate a plea deal." My stomach clenched. "Already?" "He claims Marcus is willing to testify against Jessica and Barnes in exchange for a reduced sentence. Says Marcus was manipulated, coerced, wasn't thinking clearly." "That's bullshit." "Nina knows. But the attorney will argue it. Young man, toxic relationship, older woman who manipulated him. It's a narrative juries sometimes buy. What about the texts, the planning, the celebration after accessing David's files? They'll claim Jessica forced him, threatened him, say he was terrified of her. Richard's jaw was tight. It's a standard abuse defense. Sometimes it works. We can't let him. We won't. Nina's already preparing counter-evidence. But Margaret, you need to prepare yourself. Marcus's defense will be to destroy Jessica's credibility. Paint her as the mastermind. Make himself the victim. He's not the victim. I know. David but in court, is the victim. The narrative matters as much as the evidence. We pulled up to my house. The windows were dark, empty, waiting. I didn't want to go inside. Didn't want to face the silence, the memories. The kitchen where Jessica had poisoned David. The table where we'd eaten dinner 2 nights ago while they'd lied to my face. Come stay at my place, Richard offered. I have guest rooms. You shouldn't be alone tonight. I need to be alone. I need to... My voice broke. I need to sit in our house and feel David's presence and remember why I'm doing this. Richard squeezed my shoulder. Call me if you need anything. I mean that. 3 a.m. doesn't matter. Call me. I nodded and got out of the car. The house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Coffee cup on the counter, the one I'd poured Marcus's poisoned gift into the sink. Their breakfast pastry still in the box, evidence of their final manipulation attempt. I threw it all away. Then I walked through each room, turning on every light, chasing away the shadows. In David's study, I sat at his desk again, opened his laptop, found a folder I'd somehow missed before, final messages. Inside were video files, dozens of them, dated over the last 3 weeks of David's life. I clicked on the first one. David's face appeared, gaunt and tired. This was from 3 weeks before his death. Maggie, if you're watching these, I'm gone. And you've already seen the evidence. Already know what Marcus and Jessica did, but I wanted to leave you more than just proof. I wanted to leave you context, explanations, the things I couldn't say while I was alive because... He paused, struggling for words, because saying them would make them real. He took a breath. I failed as a father. I know that now. I worked too much, missed too many games, too many birthdays, too many moments that mattered. I told myself I was building a future for our family, but the truth is, I was building a future for myself, my career, my pride, and Marcus paid the price. Tears rolled down my cheeks. But my failures don't excuse his choices. I wasn't there enough, yes, but I never lied to him, never manipulated him, never asked him to betray his values or commit crimes. Marcus made those choices himself. Influenced by Jessica, yes, but still his choices. Don't let guilt stop you from seeking justice. Don't let the memory of who Marcus used to be protect the monster he's become. I'm giving you permission, Maggie. Permission to put our son in prison. Permission to destroy the life he tried to build on my murder. Permission to choose truth over family. The video ended. I sat in the darkness crying, grieving not just for David but for Marcus too. For the little boy he'd been, for the man he could have become, for the family we'd almost had. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Margaret. Jessica's voice, sharp and desperate. I need to talk to you. How are you calling me? You're supposed to be in custody. They gave me my one call. I used it for you. Please, Margaret, please listen. I'm hanging up. I'm pregnant. The words came out in a rush. I'm 10 weeks pregnant. They're going to take my baby when it's born. Give it to strangers. My hand froze on the phone. Please. You're lying. I'm not. I can prove it. Medical records, ultrasound. I'm pregnant with Marcus's child. Your grandchild. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I know you hate me. I know what I did is unforgivable. But the baby didn't do anything wrong. If there's a baby, please don't let them take your grandchild. It's better off without you. I'll tell you everything, Jessica said frantically. Everything you don't know, about Barnes, About the others, about how deep this really goes. Information the FBI doesn't have. I'll give it all to you. Just please promise you'll make sure the baby goes to family. Why would I want to raise the child of my husband's murderer? Because it's David's grandchild. Her voice broke, real emotion for once. Because it's the only part of Marcus that isn't corrupted. Because it's innocent. I closed my eyes. Saw David holding baby Marcus. Saw myself rocking him through nightmares. Saw the family photos on my walls. 3 generations all gone now except me. I'll think about it, I said. Margaret. I hung up. Then I immediately called Nina Reeves. Jessica just used her phone call to contact me, I said. She claims she's pregnant, offering information in exchange for custody considerations. Nina was silent for a long moment. She's playing you. Classic manipulation. Is she actually pregnant? We haven't tested her yet. But even if she is, Mrs. Torres, you can't... I'm not promising her anything. But if there's a baby, if there's actually a grandchild... My voice cracked. That child is innocent, David's bloodline. I can't just abandon it to the system. We'll verify her claim. If she's pregnant, we'll discuss options. But do not engage with her directly again. Everything she says is manipulation. Everything is calculated to gain advantage. I hung up and stared at David's frozen face on the laptop screen. What would he want me to do? Save a grandchild who'd never know their grandfather? Or cut all ties with anything connected to his murderers? I jumped, heart racing. Who would be here at 9 p.m.? Through the peephole, I saw Marcus's attorney. Young, expensive suit, briefcase. I opened the door but kept the chain on. Mrs. Torres, I'm Daniel Berkowitz. What do you want? I represent your son. May I come in? No. I understand. You're upset. But I have a proposal that might interest you. One that could spare you the ordeal of a lengthy trial. I'm not interested in sparing anyone anything. Not even Marcus? Not even your own son? He pulled papers from his briefcase. I have a preliminary plea agreement. Marcus will testify against Jessica Chen and Christopher Barnes, detail their entire scheme. In exchange, the prosecution reduces the murder charge to manslaughter. He serves 15 years instead of life without parole. 15 years for murdering his father. For being manipulated into a situation he couldn't control. Mrs. Torres, Marcus was a victim too. Jessica Chen is a predator. She targeted your son, groomed him, twisted his mind. The man who helped kill David Torres isn't the real Marcus. It's a version Jessica created. Get off my property. Think about what David would want. David wanted justice. David wanted truth. David wanted his son to face consequences for his choices. I stepped back. If you ever mention my husband's name again, I'll file harassment charges. Now leave. I slammed the door. But the attorney's words lingered. 15 years instead of life. Marcus out at 46, still young enough to have a life, a second chance. Was that justice? Or mercy pretending to be justice? My phone buzzed. Richard, Barnes's attorney just filed emergency motions. Trying to get evidence suppressed. Claims David's investigation was illegal. That we violated attorney-client privilege. It's bullshit, but it'll slow things down. Me, how much? Richard, weeks, maybe months. And there's more. Barnes claims he has information on judicial corruption. He's threatening to expose sitting judges unless he gets immunity. Me, can he do that? Richard, he can try, but Nina's already getting federal oversight. This is bigger than one district now. This is a RICO case. Organized crime. Barnes has been operating a criminal enterprise for over a decade. I sat on my couch, surrounded by silence. Outside, the city continued, people living normal lives, going to work, coming home to families, unaware that miles away, a woman sat in darkness deciding whether to let her son's defense attorney convince her that 15 years was enough payment for murder. My phone rang again. Nina Reeves this time. Jessica Chen is pregnant, she said without preamble. 10 weeks, confirmed by medical examination. My world tilted. So she wasn't lying. About the pregnancy, no. About everything else? Absolutely. Her attorney is already filing motions for special consideration. citing pregnancy as a health risk that makes detention unsafe. Asking for house arrest instead of jail. It's strategy. That's ridiculous. They'll claim the stress is endangering the pregnancy, that she needs monitoring, that she's not a flight risk because she's pregnant and has family ties here. Nina paused. They're going to use that baby as a weapon, Mrs. Torres, to gain sympathy, to reduce her sentence, to paint herself as a mother fighting for her child. What about Marcus's attorney? He came to my house tonight, offered a plea deal. 15 years for manslaughter? I heard. Are you considering it? Was I? I thought about Marcus at 6 years old showing me a drawing he'd made of our family. At 12, asking if I was proud of him. At 18, crying in my arms when his girlfriend dumped him before prom. I thought about him high-fiving Jessica in that security footage. I'm not considering it. Marcus needs to face trial, needs to hear every piece of evidence, needs to sit in court while witnesses detail exactly what he did, what he destroyed. Good. Because Nina Reeves doesn't negotiate with murderers. We're going to trial, all 3 of them. Her voice hardened. And when we're done, they'll spend the rest of their lives in prison. I promise you that. After hanging up, I found another video file in David's folder. This one dated 2 days before his death. I almost couldn't bring myself to click it. David's face appeared, worse than before. I did. Gray skin, hollow eyes, struggling to breathe. Maggie, I don't have much time left. I can feel it. The poison, it's shutting down my organs. Kidneys failing, heart struggling, every breath hurts. He coughed, wincing. But I need to tell you something important. Closer to the screen. Something about the baby. Jessica's pregnant. Marcus told me last week. He was so excited, thought a baby would fix their relationship problems, thought it would make them a real family. David's eyes filled with tears. I didn't tell him what I knew, didn't tell him she was murdering me, because I couldn't destroy his joy like that. He wiped his eyes, couldn't take away his hope. But Maggie, if there's a baby, if my grandchild is born after I'm gone, please don't punish the child for the parent's sins. Don't let Jessica's crimes or Marcus's choices determine that baby's future. Be the grandmother I'll never get to be a grandfather to. Give that child the love we gave Marcus before everything went wrong. The video ended. I sat in darkness, David's words echoing in my mind. Don't punish the child for the parent's sins. But how could I love the baby of my husband's murderers? How could I hold a child whose mother had poisoned David, whose father had celebrated his death? And yet, it was David's grandchild, the last piece of him left in this world. Tomorrow they'd all be in my hands, and tomorrow this would become real, public, unavoidable. Tomorrow, the world would know that Margaret Torres' son. But tonight I was just a widow sitting in the dark, husband, mourning everything I'd lost. Everything I'd never get back. The courthouse steps were chaos. News vans lined the street. Satellite dishes pointed skyward like metal flowers. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. I kept my head down, Richard's hand firm on my elbow, guiding me through the crowd. Mrs. Torres. Did you suspect your son? Margaret. How does it feel knowing your daughter-in-law killed your husband? Is that last you're fighting for custody of the baby? Richard caught me, kept moving. Don't respond, he muttered. Nina said no comments until after arraignment. Inside, the courthouse was marginally quieter. Security guards cleared a path to the courtroom. Nina Reeves waited by the door, sharp in her dark suit, papers under her arm. They're already inside, she said. Barnes's attorney is arguing for bail, claims he's not a flight risk, has ties to the community. He has $47 million hidden in offshore accounts, Richard said. That's what I'll argue. He's absolutely a flight risk. But the judge is Judge Patricia Henshaw. She's fair but conservative on bail decisions. She might. Nina stopped, her expression shifting. Mrs. Torres, I need to warn you. Marcus is going to try to speak to you in there. His attorney will position him where you'll have to see him. It's strategy. They want the judge to see a grieving son reaching out to his mother. Let him try, I said, my voice harder than I felt. We entered the courtroom, and there they were. Christopher Barnes sat at the defense table on the left, his expensive suit replaced by a jail jumpsuit. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His attorney, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair, leaned
Jessica
close,
sat at the middle defense
table, also in jail orange. Her hair was pulled back severely, no makeup, hands folded on the table. She looked young, vulnerable, exactly what her attorney wanted. When she saw me, her expression shifted, calculated sadness, manufactured remorse, a performance. And Marcus. My son sat at the right defense table, his attorney beside him. When our eyes met, his face crumpled. Real tears, real anguish. "Mom," he mouthed. "All rise," the bailiff looked away. Called. The Honorable Judge Patricia Henshaw presiding. The judge entered, a black woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, expression stern but not unkind. She settled behind the bench, surveyed the packed courtroom, then looked down at her papers. "We have 3 defendants today, all facing serious federal charges. Let's begin with Mr. Barnes." She looked at his attorney. "Miss Fletcher, your client is charged with racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. How does he plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor, and we request bail." Mr. Barnes is a respected attorney with deep ties to this community. He has no prior criminal record. He has $47 million in offshore accounts and connections in 12 countries, Nina interrupted. "He's an extreme flight risk." Judge Henshaw's eyebrow rose. $47 million? Stolen over 12 years from multiple corporate clients, Your Honor. We have documentary evidence, bank records, shell company registrations. Mr. Barnes has been operating a sophisticated criminal enterprise while maintaining his law license and client relationships. Your Honor, Ms. Fletcher said smoothly, those allegations are unproven. The government is making assumptions based on Barnes's own financial records, Nina said coldly. Obtained through a warrant based on evidence compiled by the victim before his murder. David Torres documented everything, including Mr. Barnes's role in ordering his death. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Henshaw banged her gavel. "Order. Miss Reeves, that's a serious allegation." "It's a provable fact, Your Honor. We have communications between Mr. Barnes and TO defendant Jessica Torres discussing the need to accelerate the timeline after David Torres discovered the larger embezzlement scheme. 72 hours later, David Torres was dead from acute antifreeze poisoning. Judge Henshaw looked at Barnes. His face had gone gray. "Bail is denied," she said. "Mr. Barnes will remain in federal custody pending trial. Next, Mrs. Jessica Torres." Jessica's attorney stood, a young man ambitious-looking. "Your Honor, Mrs. Torres pleads not guilty to all charges. We request she be released on bail with electronic monitoring. Mrs. Torres is 10 weeks pregnant. The stress of incarceration poses serious health risks to both her and her unborn child. She has no prior criminal record, strong family ties." "She's charged with first-degree murder," Nina said. "Premeditated poisoning of her father-in-law over 6 months. We have her search history showing research into untraceable poisons, her purchase records for ethylene glycol, her own recorded confession to the victim discussing the poisoning." Jessica's attorney's face tightened. "That alleged confession was obtained under duress?" "It was obtained by the victim wearing a wire in his own home," Nina corrected. "Completely legal. And on that recording, Mrs. Torres explicitly threatens to make David Torres's death very, very painful if he reported her crimes." Judge Henshaw looked at Jessica. "Did you make that statement?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared. David was threatening to send Marcus to prison. I said things I didn't mean." "You said you'd make his death painful," the judge interrupted. "And then you poisoned him with enough antifreeze to cause organ failure. That sounds like follow-through, Mrs. Torres." "Your Honor, my client was in an abusive relationship," her attorney argued. "Marcus Torres manipulated her, threatened her, forced her to participate." "That's a lie." Marcus's attorney shot to his feet. "My client was the one being manipulated. Jessica Chen targeted him specifically after researching his family." Order! Judge Henshaw's gavel cracked like thunder. Both of you sit down. Save the finger-pointing for trial. Mrs. Torres, given the severity of charges and the evidence of planning and premeditation, bail is denied. You'll receive appropriate prenatal care in custody. Jessica's face crumpled. Her attorney leaned close, whispering urgently. Finally, Mr. Marcus Torres. Marcus stood, his attorney beside him. He looked at me, pleading, desperate. How does your client plead? Judge Henshaw asked. Not guilty, Your Honor. His attorney's voice was confident. And we request bail. Mr. Torres has no criminal record. He's a lifelong resident of this area. His mother is in the courtroom and willing to post bail. He's not a flight risk. I stood up. No, I'm not. The courtroom went silent. Excuse me? The judge asked. I'm not willing to post bail for Marcus Torres, I said clearly. He murdered my husband, his father. I want him to remain in custody. Marcus made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Mom, please. Mrs. Torres, his attorney said quickly, you're understandably upset, but Marcus is your son. He needs your support. He needed to not murder his father, I said. He made his choice. Now he faces the consequences. Judge Henshaw studied me for a long moment. Then she looked at Marcus. Mr. Torres, your own mother, the woman you allegedly tried to frame for these crimes, refuses to support your release. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Bail denied. Your Honor? The attorney started. Bail denied. The judge's voice was final. All 3 defendants will remain in federal custody pending trial. Preliminary hearing is set for 6 weeks from today. We'll address discovery schedules and motions at that time. She looked at Nina. Ms. Reeves, I assume you'll be seeking a joint trial? Yes, Your Honor. The crimes are interconnected. The defendants conspired together. They should be tried together. We object, all 3 defense attorneys said simultaneously. Noted. We'll argue that at the preliminary hearing. Judge Henshaw banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. As the judge left, chaos erupted. Reporters shouting, attorneys arguing, and Marcus being led away by marshals, turning back to look at me. Mom! He called out. Mom, please, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I watched them take him away. My son. My child. The boy I'd loved more than anything. I felt nothing but the murderer who'd killed my husband. Outside, the press swarmed us again. This
U.S.
time,
Attorney's
Nina
Office
is
has
committed
prepared a
to
statement.
seeking justice for David Torres, a victim of a calculated murder conspiracy. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendants will face trial, and they will be convicted. Mrs. Torres, a reporter shouted. Do you have anything to say? Richard started to pull me away, but I stopped. I looked directly at the cameras. My husband was a good man, I said, my voice steady. He worked hard. He loved his family. He tried to do the right thing, even when it cost him everything. The people who killed him, including our son, will face justice. That's all I have to say. We pushed through the crowd to Richard's car. Once inside, I finally let myself shake. You did good, Richard said quietly. David would be proud. David's dead, my voice cracked. And our son looked at me like I was the monster, like I betrayed him. He betrayed you. He betrayed David. He betrayed everything you taught him about right and wrong. Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You did the right thing, Margaret. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. When my baby is born and taken away, when Marcus spends his life in prison, when you're old and alone with no family, you'll regret choosing revenge over mercy. Jessica, I showed Richard. His jaw clenched. Forward that to Nina. Threatening a witness is a crime. I did, then blocked the number. But Jessica's words haunted me. When you're old and alone with no family. Was she right? Was I choosing revenge over everything else? Was I destroying my last chance at family, grandchild, son, future, for the sake of justice? I thought about David's video. Don't punish the child for the parent's sins. But I also thought about David dying in agony while Marcus celebrated. About Jessica poisoning his coffee while calling me Mom. About all the lies, the manipulation, the calculation behind every smile.
This was justice.
No. This was finishing what David started. 2 days after the arraignment, Nina called with news. "Christopher Barnes wants to deal," she said. "Full cooperation. Complete testimony against Marcus and Jessica. Every detail of the conspiracy."
What did you tell him?
"In exchange for 20 years instead of life, that I'd consider it. Barnes has information we need. Connections to other crimes, other victims, the full scope of his operation. His testimony could take down judges, politicians, executives we haven't even identified yet. And Marcus and Jessica? Both are claiming the other is the mastermind. Marcus says Jessica manipulated him. Jessica says Marcus forced her. They're turning on each other exactly as predicted." Nina paused. "But here's the problem: without Barnes's testimony establishing the larger conspiracy, a jury might believe one of them, might see Jessica as the victim of an abusive relationship, or Marcus as a manipulated son. With Barnes flipping, we can prove they all planned it together, that they're all equally guilty." "Do it," I said. "Make the deal with Barnes, but make sure he serves real time. The next
20
week,
years minimum.
Barnes's cooperation
Done.
hit the news. The headlines were explosive. Corporate attorney admits to 12-year fraud scheme. Barnes' testimony implicates dozens in corruption ring. Sentinel Technologies CFO murdered after discovering massive embezzlement. David's name was everywhere. His story, his integrity.
Richard
the man
called
who'd
me
given his
daily with
life to
updates.
expose corruption.
The board
is cooperating fully. We're auditing everything, every contract, every vendor, every payment going back 15 years. David saved this company, Margaret. If his investigation hadn't exposed Barnes, we'd have collapsed within a year. What about the victims? The other people Barnes stole from? We're setting up a compensation fund, using recovered assets to pay back what was stolen. It'll take years, but we're going to make everyone whole. He paused. We're also establishing the David Torres Memorial Scholarship. Full ride to business school for students from low-income backgrounds, students who work multiple jobs to afford education, like David did. He'd love that.
6 weeks
I
later,
whispered.
the preliminary hearing
I know.
arrived.
This time, I was ready for the media circus, ready for Marcus's tearful looks, ready for Jessica's manipulation attempts. What I wasn't ready for was the evidence presented. Nina had compiled everything into a presentation. Videos, audio recordings, documents, all displayed on large screens for the court. She walked through the entire conspiracy methodically. Jessica, researching Sentinel Technologies 2 years before meeting Marcus. The private investigator's report profiling Marcus as highly vulnerable to manipulation. Security footage of Jessica breaking into David's office. Text messages planning the embezzlement. Search history showing poison research. David's recorded confrontation with Jessica. The autopsy report showing ethylene glycol poisoning. Marcus's texts celebrating David's death. By the end, even the defense attorneys looked shaken. Judge Henshaw set the trial date for 4 months out. Given the complexity and volume of evidence, both sides will need adequate preparation time, but I want to be clear, this case will go to trial. The evidence is substantial, the charges are serious, and the public interest demands resolution. As we left the courthouse, a woman approached me. Older, well-dressed, tears on her face. "Mrs. Torres? I'm Eleanor Whitman. Christopher Barnes stole $2 million from my late husband's estate. We lost everything, our home, our savings. My husband died believing he'd failed to provide for our children." She took my hands. "Thank you. Thank you for exposing him. For making sure he faces justice. You've given me back my husband's honor." I hugged her while she cried. And I realized this wasn't just about David anymore. It was about every victim Barnes had destroyed, every family he'd ruined, every person who'd trusted him and been betrayed. David's death had exposed a monster, and I was going to make sure that monster paid for every single crime. That night, I had a visitor. Richard called first. Margaret, Marcus's attorney is at your door. He has papers he wants you to sign. Do not let him in. Do not sign anything. What papers? A victim impact statement. Pre-written. It asks for leniency from Marcus. Claims you forgive him. That you want mercy, not justice. It's manipulation, complete fiction. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel Berkowitz holding a folder. I opened the door but kept the chain on. Just hear me out. Leave. He held up the folder. Marcus wrote you a letter, a real one, not from me, from him. Will you at least read it? Against my better judgment, I took the envelope he slid through the gap. He's your son, Berkowitz said quietly. He made terrible mistakes. But he's still your son, and he's desperate for you to know the truth about what happened. How Jessica manipulated him, how he never wanted David to die, how everything spiraled out of control. Get off my property. Mrs. Torres, get off my property, or I call the police. He left. I locked the door, then looked at the envelope. Marcus's handwriting, my name written in the same scrawl I'd seen on homework papers and birthday cards for 31 years. I should throw it away. Burn it. Refuse to let him manipulate me even from jail. But I opened it. Dear Mom, I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it. I know I don't deserve your time or attention. But I need you to understand something. I need you to know the truth. I love Dad. I know you don't believe that anymore. But I did. Even when I resented him, even when I was angry about all the times he chose work over me, I loved him. He was my father, my hero when I was little, the man I wanted to be. And then, I met Jessica. Mom, she was like a drug. She saw everything I hated about myself and told me it wasn't my fault. Every failure, every disappointment, every time Dad criticized me, she said it was because Dad was the problem, not me. She made me believe I deserved more, that I'd been cheated, that taking what was owed to me wasn't really stealing. I know now she was manipulating me, grooming me, using my insecurities against me. But at the time, it felt like someone finally understood me, finally saw me. When she first suggested the embezzlement, I said no. I swear to God, Mom, I said no. But she kept pushing, kept telling me it wasn't really wrong because the money should have been mine anyway. That Dad had stolen my childhood by choosing work, so taking from his company was just evening the score. I still should have said no. I know that. But I didn't. And then Dad found out. And Jessica, Mom, Jessica changed. She became terrifying. She said if Dad reported us, we'd both go to prison, that our lives were over unless we dealt with the problem. I didn't know she meant killing him. I swear I didn't know. Not at first. When I figured it out, when I saw her researching poisons, I should have stopped her. I should have gone to Dad, confessed everything, faced the consequences. But I was scared. And I was weak. And I told myself that Dad would be fine. That Jessica was just researching, not actually planning anything. I was wrong. I was so wrong. The morning Dad died, I knew. Jessica had told me she was giving him the final dose. I could have stopped it, could have warned him, could have called 911. But I didn't. I let him drink that coffee. I watched him leave for work knowing he'd probably be dead by nightfall. And I did nothing. That's my crime, Mom. Not the embezzlement, not the planning. The crime is that I watched my father die and did nothing to save him. I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. That I think about Dad every single day. That I see his face when he confronted Jessica. When he begged her to let him protect me from my own choices. He loved me even knowing what I'd become. Even knowing I'd betrayed him. And I destroyed him anyway. There's a baby coming, Mom. Jessica says it's mine. I don't know if I believe her. She lies about everything. But if it's true, if there's really a child, please don't let my mistakes destroy an innocent life. Please be the grandmother Dad will never get to be a grandfather to. That baby deserves better than Jessica and me. It deserves you. I'm going to plead guilty. My attorney says I shouldn't, says I should fight. But I can't. I can't sit in court and lie about what I did. I can't blame Jessica for my own choices. I can't pretend I'm a victim when Dad is dead because of me. I'm guilty. and I deserve whatever punishment comes. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. I'm sorry I let resentment poison me. I'm sorry I chose a woman I barely knew over the family who loved me my whole life. I'm just sorry, Marcus. I read it 3 times. Then I called Nina Reeves. Marcus wants to plead guilty, I said. Is that real? Or another manipulation? His attorney called me an hour ago, offered a guilty plea in exchange for 25 years instead of life, said Marcus refuses to fight the charges anymore, that he wants to take responsibility. Nina paused. Do you believe him? Did the first? I thought about the little boy who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd hidden under my bed during thunderstorms, who'd made me promise to always love him no matter what. I thought about the man who'd high-fived Jessica while celebrating his access to David's files, who'd texted I wish he'd just die, who'd watched his father leave for work knowing that coffee was poisoned. I don't know if anything Marcus says is real anymore. Then what do you want? If he pleads guilty, there's no trial, no chance for you to face him in court, no public reckoning, just sentencing and done. What did I want? Justice, truth, but also David's murder acknowledged and punished. I wanted to believe my son was still in there somewhere, that the man who wrote that letter was real, that remorse was possible. Let him plead guilty, I said, but I want to give a victim impact statement at sentencing. I want to look him in the eye and tell him exactly what he's done, what he's destroyed, what he's cost this family. Done. 3 days later, Marcus Torres pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and embezzlement. 25 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 17. Jessica Torres, furious at being abandoned by her co-conspirator, Christopher Barnes, true to his word, provided testimony against everyone. Names, dates, accounts, details of a corruption network that reached into judges' chambers and senators' offices. Jessica's trial began on a cold Monday morning in February, 8 months after David's death. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution, Richard beside me. The courtroom was packed, reporters, victims of Barnes's other schemes, curious onlookers drawn by the sensational headlines. Everyone wanted to see the woman Jessica entered in a prison jumpsuit trial, her belly now visibly swollen at 7 months pregnant. She'd refused the maternity clothes the jail offered, probably on her attorney's advice. The optics were better this way, vulnerable pregnant woman in prison orange, clearly suffering. The performance never stopped with her. Nina Reeves stood to deliver her opening statement, confident and precise. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about greed, manipulation, and cold-blooded murder. Over the next 2 weeks, we will prove that Jessica Chen systematically poisoned David Torres over 6 months, causing his organs to fail and ultimately triggering the heart attack that killed him. We will show you her search history researching untraceable poisons. We will play you her own recorded confession where she threatened to make his death very, very painful. We will present autopsy evidence showing lethal levels of ethylene glycol, antifreeze, in his system, and we will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Jessica Chen is a murderer. Jessica's attorney, a polished man named Roland Pierce, stood for the defense. The prosecution wants you to believe my client is a monster, but what you'll actually see is a young woman trapped in an abusive relationship, manipulated by a man who threatened her life if she didn't cooperate. Marcus Torres masterminded this entire scheme. He researched the poisons. He administered the fatal doses. He threatened to kill Jessica if she told anyone. She's not a murderer. She's a victim who had no choice but to participate or die herself. I gripped Richard's hand. The defense strategy was clear. Blame Marcus for everything. The first week of trial was methodical. Nina presented the timeline, the evidence, the documentation. Medical examiners testified about the poisoning. FBI forensic accountants detailed the embezzlement. Each specialist showed Jessica's search history, dozens of queries about antifreeze poisoning, symptoms, lethal doses, detection methods. But then came the second week, and everything changed. Nina called Jessica's former cellmate to the stand, a woman named Carmen Rodriguez, serving time for check fraud. Ms. Rodriguez, Nina began, did you have conversations with the defendant while sharing a cell? Yeah. She talked a lot, couldn't shut up actually. Carmen looked at Jessica with contempt, kept complaining about how Marcus ruined everything, how she'd planned it all perfectly until he went rogue. Can you elaborate on what she meant
Jessica's
by
face
went
pale.
rogue? She said, Carmen glanced at her notes. She said Marcus was supposed to give David small doses of antifreeze for 6 more months, make it look like a slow decline, but Marcus got impatient. Started giving him double and triple doses without telling her. She said Marcus couldn't wait for his inheritance, so he accelerated the timeline. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Objection. Roland Pierce was on his feet. Hearsay. Jailhouse confession testimony is notoriously unreliable. It's an admission by a party opponent, Nina countered. Completely admissible.
Judge Henshaw
and we have
it.
corroborating evidence. Nina pulled up text messages recovered from Marcus's phone. Messages he'd thought he'd deleted, but that David's spyware had captured. Marcus to Jessica. 3 weeks before David died. This is taking too long. He's still walking around, still working. We need to finish this. Jessica to Marcus. We stick to the plan. Small doses. No sudden changes that trigger suspicion. Marcus, I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of watching him get weaker but not weak enough. I'm handling this my way. Jessica, don't you dare. You'll ruin everything. We need this to look natural. Marcus, too late. I already tripled this morning's dose. Should kick in within 48 hours. Jessica, you idiot. You're going to get us caught. Marcus, no. I'm going to get us paid. And if you try to stop me, you'll be next. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. My son hadn't just participated in murder, he'd escalated it, accelerated it, made David's death more painful because he couldn't wait for his inheritance. Her voice cutting through my shock. We also have evidence that Marcus Torres was planning a second murder. She pulled up insurance documents. 2 months before David Torres died, Marcus Torres took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Jessica Chen. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary. When questioned about this policy, Marcus told the insurance agent that it was standard practice for married couples. A timeline appeared on the screen, but look at the timing. Month 1, Marcus takes out $500,000 policy on Jessica. Month 2, Jessica discovers she's pregnant, tells Marcus. Month 3, Marcus begins researching accidental death scenarios. Month 4, David Torres dies. Month 5, Marcus planned to kill Jessica. We recovered Marcus's search history from his laptop, Nina continued. Searches for carbon monoxide poisoning looks like accident. How to stage a fall downstairs. Pregnancy complications that cause death. He was planning to murder his pregnant wife and make it look like an accident. The courtroom was silent except for someone's shocked gasp. Jessica sat frozen at the defense table, her hand protectively on her belly. Jessica Chen realized what Marcus was planning, Nina said. That's why she kept the pregnancy secret from him initially. That's why she started documenting his threats. She knew she was next. The pregnancy wasn't a blessing to Marcus, it was an obstacle, a witness, a complication that needed to be eliminated. Nina pulled up more text messages, these from Jessica to her friend. Jessica to friend, I think Marcus is going to kill me. He keeps talking about how much easier things would be if I wasn't around. He asked me if I've updated my will. I'm terrified. Friend, leave him. Go to the police. Jessica, I can't. He knows too much. If I turn him in, he'll say I poisoned David alone. He has evidence he's been collecting, making it look like I'm the only guilty one. I'm trapped. The friend was called to testify, confirming the messages were real. Confirming Jessica had been afraid of Marcus in the weeks before their arrests. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. This wasn't just Jessica manipulating Marcus. This was Marcus manipulating Jessica right back. 2 predators circling each other, each planning to destroy the other after they'd gotten what they wanted. Mrs. Torres didn't kill David Torres alone, Nina said in her closing argument. But she also wasn't the mastermind. Both of them, Marcus and Jessica, conspired together. Both poisoned him. Both planned to frame his mother. and both planned to betray each other once they had the money. This isn't a case of one victim and one villain. This is a case of two villains who destroyed a good man and were planning to destroy each other. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was read. We find the defendant, Jessica's face crumpled, guilty of second-degree murder. She put her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. Guilty of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Guilty of embezzlement. Guilty of conspiracy to commit money laundering. Every charge. Guilty on every single count. Judge Henshaw set sentencing. As they led Jessica away, later, she turned to look at me. After the baby was born. Not angry now, just broken. He was going to kill me too, she said, loud enough for the courtroom to hear. I was a victim just like David. Marcus destroyed both of us. I said nothing. Because even if it was true, even if Marcus had planned to murder her, she'd still poisoned my husband. She'd still participated in the scheme. She'd still threatened to make David's death painful. Being a victim didn't erase being a criminal. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Mrs. Torres, did you know your son was planning to kill his wife? How does it feel knowing Marcus manipulated everyone? Nina stepped forward. Marcus Torres has already pleaded guilty and is serving 25 years. Jessica Chen Torres has been convicted and will be sentenced after she gives birth. Christopher Barnes is cooperating with federal authorities and will be sentenced separately. Justice has been served. But had it? I drove home in silence, Richard following in his own car to make sure I got there safely. Inside my empty house, I sat in the dark thinking about the son I'd raised. The man who'd researched how to murder his signature to buy a car. When had Marcus become this? When had the manipulation started? Had Jessica really corrupted him, or had the corruption always been there, just waiting for someone to give him permission to act on it? My phone rang. Nina. Margaret, there's something else. Something we didn't present at trial because it wasn't relevant to Jessica's case. But you need to know. She paused. Barnes attempted to flee the country yesterday. What? He violated his cooperation agreement. Tried to board a private plane to Brazil with $3 million in cash and fake documents. Customs caught him at the airport. He's back in custody, and all plea deals are off the table. He's going away for life now. Even Barnes, with everything to lose, had tried to run, had tried to escape consequences. There's more, Nina continued. In Barnes's belongings, we found documents showing he'd been planning to disappear for months. Fake identity, offshore accounts we hadn't discovered, properties in countries without extradition treaties, and, she hesitated. Margaret, he had a file on you. Detailed surveillance. Photos of your house, your routine, places you shop. He was tracking you. My blood went cold. Why? We think he was planning to eliminate you if you became a problem, if you refused to sign over the shares, if you investigated too closely. Nina's voice was grim. David's evidence didn't just save his company. It saved your life. If you'd signed those papers, if you'd transferred those shares, I thought about standing in Barnes would have killed you to cover his tracks, pen in hand, about to sign. About how close I'd come to giving him everything he wanted. About how David's final gift to me wasn't just evidence, it was survival. Thank you for telling me, I whispered. The sentencing hearings are next month. Barnes first, then Jessica, then Marcus's final sentencing allocation. Will you be giving victim impact statements? For all three, I said. I want them to hear exactly what they've cost this family, what they've destroyed. I want them to carry David's memory into their prison cells. After hanging up, I went to David's study, sat in his chair, opened his laptop one more time. There was one video file I hadn't watched yet. The last one. Dated the morning he died. I clicked play. David's face appeared, barely recognizable. Gray skin, hollow eyes. If you're watching this, I'm struggling to breathe. It's over, and I need you to know something important. He coughed, wincing in pain. I forgive Marcus. I forgive Jessica. I even forgive Barnes. Not because they deserve it, they don't, but because carrying hate will poison you the way the antifreeze poisoned me. Don't let them destroy you from beyond the grave." Tears streamed down my face. Get justice. Absolutely. Make them face consequences. But don't let revenge consume you. Don't let this define the rest of your life. David smiled weakly. You have so much life left to live, Maggie. Don't waste it on hate. Live for both of us now. Live fully, love completely, and when you're ready, forgive, not for them, for you. The video ended. I sat in the darkness. Forgiveness. David's final words echoing in my mind. Could I ever forgive Marcus for what he'd done? Could I look at my son, now revealed to be a man capable of planning multiple murders, and find any trace of forgiveness in my heart? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. I would get justice first. I would make sure every single person who'd hurt David faced the full weight of their crimes. And then, maybe someday years from now, I would work on forgiveness. But not today. Today, I was still too angry, too hurt, too focused on making sure David's death meant something. Tomorrow was Jessica's baby's due date. Tomorrow, my grandchild would be born in a prison hospital, and I had a decision to make about whether to be part of that innocent child's life. David's voice echoed, "Don't punish the child for the parent's sins." But how could I hold the baby of my husband's murderers without seeing their crimes? How could I love something born from such darkness? I didn't have the answer yet. But I had until tomorrow to figure it out. "Mrs. Torres?" The call came. "This is San Francisco County Jail Medical Unit. Jessica Torres has gone into labor. She's asking for you." I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Why would she ask for me? "She says," the nurse hesitated, "she says you're the only family she has, that you're the only one who might care about the baby. She's asking if you'll be there when it's born." "Mrs. Torres, I understand your position," I said automatically. "But this baby is innocent. And Jessica, she's terrified. She's 7 months into a pregnancy, about to give birth in a prison hospital, knowing she'll only have hours with her child before it's taken away. Whatever she's done, that's a terrible thing to face alone." I thought about David's video, about his plea to not punish the child. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. The prison hospital was exactly as grim as expected. Fluorescent lights, guards at every door, the smell of disinfectant masking something worse underneath. They led me to a labor and delivery room where Jessica lay in a hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, her face pale and sweaty. "Mom," she whispered when she saw me. "Not Margaret, Mom, still playing the role even now." "Don't call me that," I said coldly. "I'm here for the baby, not for you." She flinched but nodded. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve." "You're right, you don't. So don't thank me. Just focus on delivering a healthy child." The next 6 hours were surreal. I sat in that room watching my husband's murderer give birth to my grandchild, wondering what kind of cosmic joke this was. A guard stood by the door the entire time. A social worker waited outside, ready to take custody the moment the baby was born. At 9:23 a.m., my grandson entered the world. They placed him on Jessica's chest for exactly 2 minutes, prison policy for inmates giving birth. Jessica sobbed as she held him, kissing his tiny head, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. Please know I love you." Then the social worker took him away. Jessica's screams followed me down the hallway as I left with the social worker to discuss placement options. "The baby is healthy," the social worker said. 7 pounds 3 ounces, no complications. Jessica named him David Marcus Torres. I stopped walking. She named him after his grandfather and father. "Yes." The social worker consulted her tablet. "Now for placement. Jessica listed you as her preferred guardian. But given the circumstances, family court will need to determine what's in the child's best interest. Are you interested in custody?" I looked through the window at the tiny baby in the nursery, David's grandson, my grandchild. I need
Born
time
from
to
murder
think,
and betrayal,
I said,
but
innocent of all of it. You have 72 hours before we place him in emergency foster care. After that, the process becomes much more complicated. I spent those 3 days in agony. Richard came to my house, sat with me while I debated. What would David want? He asked. David wanted me to love this child, to give him the family his parents destroyed. I stared at the ceiling. But Richard, I look at pictures of that baby and all I see is Marcus and Jessica. All I see is the people who murdered my husband. How can I raise a child while seeing his killers in his face every single day? Or, Richard said gently, you could see David. You could see your second chance to raise a child with love instead of resentment. You could be the grandmother who breaks the cycle. I'm 52 years old. By the time he graduates high school, I'll be 70. Can I really do this? Only you can answer that. On the third day, I went to visit the baby in the hospital nursery. A nurse brought him to the window so I could see him up close. He had David's nose, David's chin. When he opened his eyes, bright blue like David's had been before they darkened to brown. And I felt something crack inside my chest. I'll take some wall I built to protect myself from more pain. But on one condition, his parents have no contact, no letters, no visits, no rights. They're strangers to him. I'm his mother now. The legal process took 2 months. Jessica, facing 25 years in prison, signed away her parental rights. Marcus, serving his sentence, initially refused, until I sent him a letter. You planned to kill your pregnant wife for insurance money. You researched how to stage her death as an accident. You would have murdered your own child's mother. Now you want parental rights? Sign the papers, Marcus. Give your son the one gift you never gave your father, freedom from your destruction. He signed. At 52 years old, I became a mother again, to David Marcus Torres, who I privately called just David. Little David. 4 months later, David Jr., the sentencing hearings my second began. Chance at the name. First was Christopher Barnes. He stood before Judge Henshaw looking decades older than he had at arraignment. Prison hadn't been kind to him. The expensive suits and polished appearance were gone, replaced by a gaunt man in an orange jumpsuit. Mr. Barnes, Judge Henshaw said, you've been convicted of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement of $47 million from multiple victims, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and attempted flight from prosecution. Before I imposed sentence, carrying 4-month-old David in my arms. Does the victim have a statement? The optics were intentional. I wanted Barnes to see what he'd destroyed. To see David's grandson who would never know his grandfather because of Barnes's greed. Your Honor, Christopher Barnes didn't just steal money, he stole lives. My husband David Torres worked for 20 years to build something honest and good. Barnes corrupted it, twisted it, and when David discovered the truth, Barnes ordered his death. My voice shook but held. Because of Barnes, my grandson will never meet his grandfather, will never hear David's laugh or feel his hug or learn from his wisdom. Because of Barnes, I'm a widow raising a baby alone at 52 years old. Because of Barnes, dozens of families lost their savings, their homes, you were David's friend, futures. I continued. Barnes you were trusted, look at me. Respected. You had everything, money, reputation, success. But it wasn't enough. You wanted more, and your greed destroyed a good man who only wanted to do the right thing. I sat down, David starting to fuss in my arms. Judge Henshaw's face was stern. Mr. Barnes, in my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen corruption this extensive or callous. You betrayed every client who trusted you. You corrupted the legal profession. And you orchestrated the murder of a man who considered you a friend. She paused. I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. You will also be required to pay restitution to all victims in the full amount of $47 million plus interest. Barnes, you are hereby disbarred and will never practice law again. They led him away, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness where rage used to be. 2 weeks later, Jessica's sentencing. She looked smaller somehow, thinner, despite having just given birth. The belly was gone, but the haunted look in her eyes remained. Miss Chen, Judge Henshaw said. She dropped the Torres, stripping Jessica of even the marriage name. You've been convicted of second-degree murder, conspiracy, embezzlement, and fraud. You poisoned a man for 6 months, watching him deteriorate, causing him unimaginable suffering. You recorded his pain. You documented his decline, and when he confronted you, you threatened to make his death worse. Jessica started crying. Before sentencing, the victim's widow has a statement. I stood again, this time without the baby. Richard held David Jr. in the hallway. I didn't want him in the courtroom for this. "Jessica, you called me Mom," I said, and she looked up, tears streaming. "You held my hand at my husband's funeral. You brought me coffee the morning after you'd poisoned him. You looked me in the eyes and lied with such conviction that I believed every word." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught." My voice hardened. "You targeted my son. You researched my family like we were marks in a con. You decided David was worth more to you dead than alive. And you executed your plan with precision and cruelty. You loved the idea of wealth without work. You loved the fantasy of stealing someone's life's work and getting away with it." I leaned forward. "You gave birth to a beautiful baby boy 4 months ago. You held him for 2 minutes before they took him away. And now he's mine. I'm raising him. He'll never know you, never visit you, never call you Mom. He'll grow up knowing his biological mother was a murderer, and his real mother is the woman who got justice for his grandfather." Jessica's sobs filled the courtroom. "That's your punishment," I said quietly. "Not the prison sentence, not the years behind bars. It's knowing that your son will have a good life, a loving family, and every opportunity you tried to steal. And you won't be part of any of it. You'll spend decades in a cell knowing he's out there. I sat growing down, up, living, thriving, without you." Judge Henshaw's expression was grave. "Miss Chen, I sentence you 25 years in federal prison. You will be eligible for parole in 17 years, at which time your suitability for release will be evaluated. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $8.3 million, jointly with Marcus Torres. And you will have no contact with your biological child, unless he, as an adult, chooses to initiate it." Jessica buried her face in her hands as they led her away. Finally, Marcus's sentencing allocation. He'd already pleaded guilty, already accepted his 25-year sentence, but the court required a formal sentencing hearing where victims could speak. I debated whether to attend, whether I could face my son one more time, whether I could look him in the eyes and tell him what he'd cost us. In the end, I went. Because David deserved to have his murder acknowledged, condemned, remembered. Marcus looked terrible. Prison had hollowed him out. He'd lost weight, his skin was pale, his eyes empty. When they brought him into the courtroom, he looked at me with such desperate hope that I had to look away. "Mr. Torres," Judge Henshaw said, "you pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The plea agreement stipulates 25 years with eligibility for parole in 17. However, before I formally impose sentence, your mother has requested to give a victim impact statement." Marcus's face crumpled. "Mom, please." "You'll remain silent," the judge said sharply. "Mrs. Torres, proceed." I walked to the podium, carrying a folder. Inside were photos. Our family, through the years. I placed them on the ledge facing Marcus so he had to look at them. "Marcus, these are the people you destroyed," I said. "This is you at 3 years old, sitting on your father's shoulders at the beach. You were laughing. David was laughing. We were happy." I pointed to the next photo. "This is your 10th birthday. David took the day off work, something he almost never did, to take you to that baseball game you'd been begging to see. You were so excited you could barely sit still." Marcus was crying silently. "This is your high school graduation. David was so proud. You'd struggled through school, but you'd made it, and he believed in you. Believed you'd find your way." I pointed to another. "This is our family at Thanksgiving, 2 years before you murdered him. You're sitting right next to David." "I didn't smiling. Know then." Planning his death while carving the turkey. "I hadn't planned it yet." "But you were already resentful, already angry, already telling yourself that you deserved more than he'd given you." I gathered the photos. Marcus, your father loved you until his last breath. Even knowing you'd betrayed him, even knowing you were killing him, he tried to protect you. He gave you chances to stop, to confess, to choose right over wrong. I know. And you chose murder. You chose to accelerate the poisoning because you couldn't wait for your inheritance. You researched how to kill your pregnant wife because she'd become inconvenient. You planned to frame me for crimes you committed. And through it all, you told yourself you were the victim, that David had failed you, that you deserved this. Marcus put his head in his hands. You have a son, I said, and he looked up sharply. 4 months old, beautiful, healthy, perfect. He has David's nose, David's eyes, David's smile. I paused. And he'll never know you. I'm raising him. He'll call me Mom. He'll grow up knowing his grandfather was a hero who exposed corruption, and his biological father was a murderer who's in prison. That's your legacy, Marcus. That's what you built with your resentment and greed. Please, Marcus whispered. Please let me at least see him. Write to him. Let him know I'm sorry. You signed away your parental rights. You have no legal connection to him. And I will make sure he never seeks you out, never wonders about you, never wastes a moment of his beautiful life thinking about the man who destroyed his grandfather. My voice broke. You were my son. I loved you. I defended you. I believed in you even when David had doubts. And you repaid that love by murdering the man I'd built my entire life with. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, but you can't. David is dead. You killed him. And sorry doesn't resurrect the dead. I walked back to my seat, my legs shaking. Judge Henshaw's voice was cold. Mr. Torres, I've presided over many cases in my career. I've seen addiction drive people to terrible acts. I've seen mental illness, abuse, desperation. But what I see in you is simple, calculated evil. You murdered your father for money. You planned to murder your wife for convenience. And you tried to destroy your mother to cover your crimes. She looked at the plea agreement. This court accepts your guilty plea. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. However, I'm recommending to the parole board that you serve every single day of that sentence. You are a danger to every person who trusts you, and you should never, ever Marcus's attorney tried to argue, another but the judge wasn't the way you've hurt yours. They took him away, and he looked back one more time, at me, at the photos still on the podium, at the life he'd destroyed. I watched him disappear through the door, and I felt something release inside me. Some weight I'd been carrying since the moment Richard showed me that security footage. It was done. David's murder had been acknowledged, condemned, punished. The people who'd killed him would spend decades in prison. And I could finally start to grieve. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but I had no statement. Nina handled them while Richard drove me home. You did good, he said quietly. David would be proud. David's dead, I said, but there was less bitterness in the words now, just sadness. But at least his death meant something. Barnes's entire operation is destroyed. Dozens of victims are getting restitution. Corporate fraud laws are being strengthened because of his case. And Marcus and Jessica will be old before they taste freedom, Richard added. If they ever do. Jessica's 25 years, Marcus is 25 years. They'll both be in their 50s when they're even eligible for parole. We pulled into my driveway, and the parole board house rarely I'd once shared with David, the house where Jessica had poisoned him, the house where I'd learned the truth. I'm selling it, I said suddenly. I can't raise David's grandson here. Where will you go? Can't walk through these rooms without seeing ghosts. I need a fresh start. I don't know yet. Somewhere new. Somewhere David and I never went together, so I'm not constantly reminded of what I've lost. I looked at Richard. Thank you. For everything. For believing David. For protecting me. For helping me finish what he started. It's what family does, Richard said simply. I went inside where my neighbor was watching David Jr. The baby was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his biological parents had just been sentenced to decades in prison, unaware of the darkness he'd been born from. But he'd never have stories about David Torres, the grandfather he'd never meet, the honest man who'd worked hard, loved deeply, and given his life to expose corruption. And I'd make sure David Jr. grew up knowing that truth matters more than comfort, that justice is worth fighting for, that some betrayals demand consequences. He'd never know his biological parents, but he'd know his grandfather's legacy, and that would be enough. 1 year later, I stood at David's grave on a cool October morning, David Jr., DJ as I'd started calling him, in my arms. He was 14 months old now, starting to walk, babbling words that almost made sense. "This is your grandfather," I told him, kneeling so he could touch the headstone. "David Torres, the best man I ever knew." DJ patted the cold marble, saying "da-da" in that way toddlers do when everything is da-da. "Close enough," I whispered. The headstone was simple. David Anthony Torres, beloved husband, father, truth seeker 1968 to 2024. He chose right over easy. I'd sold the house in San Francisco 6 months ago. Too many memories. Too much pain in every room. Richard had helped me find a small place in Portland, close enough to visit when needed, far enough to feel like a fresh start. Sentinel Technologies had survived the scandal. Richard had stepped down as CEO, installing new leadership focused on transparency and ethical practices. The company had established the David Torres Memorial Ethics Committee, reviewing all major financial decisions. David's shares, which I still owned, were worth more now than when he died. Turned out that honesty and transparency were good for business. The David Torres Foundation for Corporate Fraud Victims had launched 8 months ago. We helped people who'd been victimized by schemes like Barnes's, provided legal assistance, financial counseling, emotional support. We'd already helped 43 families recover over $12 million in stolen assets. And last month, I'd been invited to testify before Congress about corporate fraud prevention and elder financial abuse. I'd sat in that hearing room, DJ on my hip, because I refused to leave him with strangers anymore, and told David's story to senators and representatives. Told them about the man who'd discovered massive corruption and paid for it with his life. Told them about the need for stronger whistleblower protections, better forensic accounting standards, harsher penalties for white-collar crime. David Torres should be here today, I'd said to the committee. He should be the one testifying about what he discovered, but he was murdered for trying to do the right thing, so I'm here in his place, and I'm asking you to make sure no other family has to lose someone the way I lost David. Make sure truth-tellers are protected, make sure criminals face real consequences, make sure justice means something. The hearing had been covered by every major news outlet. The Torres Act, proposed legislation strengthening corporate fraud penalties, was making its way through committee. David's death was changing laws, protecting future victims, meaning something beyond our personal tragedy. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard, board meeting next week. They want to discuss naming the new headquarters building after David. Thoughts? I smiled. David would have hated that. He'd always been uncomfortable with recognition, but he deserved it. Me, he'd say no. Do it anyway. DJ started fussing, ready for his morning snack. I stood, brushing dirt off my knees. "We'll come back next week," I told David's headstone. "I'll bring DJ to visit his grandfather. Tell him more stories about you. Make sure he knows where he comes from." As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with someone, a woman, maybe 60, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'm Patricia Hammond. I had to thank you. Barnes stole $300,000 from my late mother's estate. She died believing she'd failed to provide for her grandchildren. The foundation you started, they helped us recover most of it. My mother's name is cleared. Her grandchildren can go to college." Tears filled her eyes. "Because of you. Because David exposed Barnes. Because you didn't let his death be for nothing." I didn't know what to say. "I come here sometimes," Patricia continued, gesturing to David's grave, "to say thank you, to tell him that he saved my family even though he never knew us." Is that weird?" "No," I said, my voice thick. "No, I think he'd like that. Knowing his sacrifice helped people." We talked for a few more minutes, about her mother, about Barnes's trial, about the foundation's work. Then she left, and I stood there holding DJ, realizing something profound. David's death had meaning. Not the meaning he'd have chosen. He'd have preferred to live, to see his grandson grow up, to grow old with me. But in dying, he'd exposed a corruption network that had victimized hundreds of people. He'd changed laws, protected future victims, left a legacy bigger than one life. And maybe that was enough. 2 months later, another letter arrived. From Jessica. I'd received 3 over the past year. The first begging for updates about DJ. The second asking for forgiveness. The third proposing a visitation arrangement when she was released. I'd burned them all without responding. This one was different. The envelope was thicker. Inside was a letter and something else. A photo of Jessica, visibly older, thinner, standing with a group of women in prison uniforms. They were holding books. The letter read, "Dear Margaret, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect anything from you. But I need to say it anyway. I've had 17 months in prison to think about what I did, to face what I am. And the truth is, I'm a monster. Not because Marcus manipulated me, not because I had a hard childhood or bad influences, because I made choices, calculated, cruel choices to value money over human life. I poisoned your husband. I watched him suffer. I threatened to make his death painful when he confronted me. There's no excuse for that. I did all of it while calling you mom and explanation that makes it okay. I destroyed a good man and broke a family for money I didn't even get to spend. I want you to know that I've started a program here in prison, teaching financial literacy to inmates who, like me, made terrible choices out of greed or desperation. We study ethics, consequences, the real cost of white-collar crime. It's not much, it doesn't undo what I did, but it's something. I don't ask for your forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I ask that you tell DJ the truth about me when he's old enough. Don't make me into a monster in his stories. I was a person who became monstrous through my choices. I want him to learn from my mistakes, to understand that one bad decision leads to another until you're so deep in darkness, you forget what light looks like. I loved Marcus. That part was real, but loving someone doesn't excuse participating in murder. It doesn't make you less guilty. It just makes the guilt more complicated. I'm sorry. I know those words are hollow, but they're all I have. Jessica Chen. P.S. I've signed legal documents relinquishing all future claims to DJ. No custody requests when I'm released. No visitation rights. He's yours completely. It's the only gift I can give him, freedom from me. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't expected to do. I wrote back. Jessica, you're right. Your apology is hollow. Sorry doesn't resurrect the dead. It doesn't give DJ his grandfather. It doesn't return the years I lost with David. But I believe you when you say you understand what you've become. And I respect that you're trying to do something meaningful with your remaining years, even if it can't undo the past. I won't tell DJ you're a monster. I'll tell him the truth. You made terrible choices that destroyed lives. You valued money over human decency. You participated in the murder of a good man, and you spent the rest of your life in prison facing the consequences of those choices. That's not a monster story, that's a cautionary tale, and maybe that's more valuable. I won't bring DJ to visit you. I won't send photos or updates. That door is closed. But I will tell him that you acknowledged your crimes, that you took responsibility, that you tried in your small way to make amends. It won't earn you forgiveness, but it earns you truth. That's all David ever wanted, truth, even when it hurt, even when it cost everything. Margaret Torres. I mailed it the next day and felt something release inside me. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet. Might never be there. But acknowledgement that even the guilty could seek redemption, even if they never earned it. Marcus never wrote. His attorney sent updates. Marcus was in protective custody because child killers and parent killers aren't safe in general population. He'd attempted suicide twice. He was in therapy. I felt nothing reading those updates. He'd asked for photos of DJ and been denied. No pity, just nothing. My son was gone. The man in prison was a stranger wearing Marcus's face. 18 months after David's death, I got a call from a producer at a major network. "Mrs. Torres, we'd like to do a documentary about your husband's case, about corporate fraud, about the cost of truth-telling. Would you be interested in participating?" I thought about it for a week, then agreed, with conditions. The focus had to be on David's integrity, not our tragedy, on the systemic issues he'd exposed, not just the sensational murder, on solutions, not just problems. The documentary, The Price of Truth, the David Torres story, aired 6 months later. It won awards, sparked conversations, led to more congressional hearings, more whistleblower protections, more corporate fraud prosecutions, and it meant that David's name, his real legacy, would live beyond the headlines about his murder. 2 years after David's death, on what would have been our 30th anniversary, I took DJ back to the courthouse where it all ended. Not inside, just to the steps where I'd stood after sentencing, where reporters had swarmed, where I'd felt the weight of justice delivered but life still shattered. "Your grandfather died here," I told DJ, who at 2 years old was more interested in the pigeons than my words. Not literally here, but the people who killed him faced consequences here. "And that matters." DJ pointed at a pigeon. "Bird." "Yes, buddy, bird. Simple. Innocent. Unaware of the darkness he'd been born from or the light I was trying to create for his future. The Torres Act my phone just rang. Passed. Richard. Full Senate approval. The president will sign it next week. They're asking if you'll attend the signing ceremony. I looked at DJ, chasing pigeons with toddler enthusiasm. "Yes," I said. "We'll be there." Because David's death had changed laws, had protected future victims, had meant something beyond our personal tragedy. And that was worth witnessing. The White House signing ceremony was surreal. I stood behind the president, holding DJ, while she signed the David Torres Corporate Fraud Prevention Act into law. Cameras flashed. Reporters took notes. And I felt David's presence so strongly I almost turned around expecting to see him. "This law is named for a man who gave his life fighting corruption," the president said. David Torres could have stayed quiet, could have protected himself, but he chose truth over safety, justice over comfort. And because of his courage, we're making it harder for corporate criminals to steal from honest Americans. We're protecting the next David Torres. We're saying that truth-telling matters, that integrity has value, that good people shouldn't have to die for doing the right thing. She handed me the signing pen. I clutched it, thinking about David's hands holding it if he'd lived, about the life we'd have had, the grandson we'd have raised together. But I also thought about the 43 families the foundation had helped, the laws that would protect future whistleblowers, the corruption network that had been destroyed. David's death had cost us everything, but it had saved others from losing everything too. And maybe that was enough. 3 years after David's death, I spoke at a victim advocacy conference in Chicago. The room was packed with people who'd been betrayed by family members, stolen from by trusted advisors, manipulated by people they'd loved. "My name is Margaret Torres," I began, DJ playing quietly at my feet with blocks. 3 years ago, my husband was murdered by our son and daughter-in-law. They poisoned him over 6 months, embezzled millions, tried to frame me for their crimes, and when they were caught, they each blamed the other. The room was silent. "I'm not going to tell you that time heals all wounds, that forgiveness is mandatory, that you have to reconcile with the people who hurt you, because those are lies we tell ourselves to feel better about. What I'm going to tell you is that justice matters." People were nodding. "That holding people accountable isn't revenge, it's truth. That you can love someone and still prosecute them. That you can grieve what was while fighting for what's right." I looked at DJ, who'd stood up and was toddling toward me. "My son is in prison. My daughter-in-law is in prison. The attorney who orchestrated everything is in prison. They'll be there for decades. And I don't feel guilty about that. I feel relief. Because they faced consequences. Because David's murder was acknowledged, condemned, punished." DJ reached me, and I picked him up. "This is my grandson, born in prison to my husband's murderers. And I'm raising him, teaching him that truth matters, that integrity has value, that some betrayals demand justice, not mercy." I looked at the audience, hundreds of faces, all carrying their own stories of betrayal and survival. If you've experienced betrayal by those you trusted most, know you're not alone. Know that seeking justice doesn't make you vindictive, it makes you strong. Know that you can survive this. You can rebuild. You can find purpose in the pain. Seek justice. Tears streamed down faces throughout the room. Truth always wins, even when love loses. DJ put his small hand on my cheek. Mama. Not mom, not grandma. Mama. Because that's story who I was to him now. You. Yes, baby. I continued. Mama's here, looking at the cameras recording for the conference live stream. Subscribe to the Foundation's newsletter. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they can survive betrayal too. Support legislation that protects victims and punishes white-collar criminals. Make sure no other family has to lose someone the way we lost David. The room erupted in applause. Afterward, dozens of people approached me, shared their stories, thanked me for speaking truth, for refusing to forgive without accountability, for showing that justice and healing could coexist. And I realized this was my purpose now. Not just raising DJ, not just running the foundation, but being a voice for people who'd been betrayed by those they loved most. Being living proof that you could survive the unsurvivable. That truth mattered more than comfort. That some betrayals demanded consequences. And that love, real love, meant holding people accountable, not protecting them from themselves. That night, in my hotel room, I pulled out the box I'd been carrying for 3 years. David's wedding ring. The one they'd removed at the hospital. The one I'd had engraved with new words, truth over comfort. DT 1968 to 2024. Beside me, I threaded it onto a chain and put unaware of the grandfather who died so he could have a different future. A better one. I finished it. I whispered to David's memory. Your murder is avenged. Your legacy is protected. Your grandson is safe. I kept my promise. The ring rested against my heart, warm from my skin. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than grief or rage. I felt peace. Not the peace